going to get started despite the technical difficulties that they're having in the back of the room. We don't need the smart board quite yet. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. We could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and good evening, and welcome to the October 9th, 2017 business meeting of Milford Board of Education. I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Fieser for student staff recognition.
Thank you, Mrs. Glenn. Members of the board, good evening to members of the public. So I always love this part of the meeting. It's actually the high point, plus the high school presentations, of course, because it's all about students and staff, which is great. Before I get into specific students and staff that we're going to recognize this evening, I just thought I would let everyone know some of the things that have been going on in the schools around the hurricanes and the support that our students and staff have provided. So as you know, Milford is known as the small city with the big heart, and it's very easy to see why that slogan is applied to this great city. With all the recent catastrophic weather events in Texas, Florida, and now Puerto Rico and the islands, our students, staff, and families across the district jumped right into action on their fundraising efforts for those in need. This is just some samples of what happened in our schools. So at Harborside, they had a huge fundraiser, and they sought to raise $1,500. And the prize, if they won $1,500, was pie in the face for certain faculty members, including the principal. They actually raised over $2,500 for the Red Cross. Help Texas Day was held at Orchard Hills School, and I presume that was going to help students and young people in the schools at Orchard and down in Texas.
One of our staff is friends with a teacher down in the school staff.
So a specific school of a teacher colleague of one of the teachers at Orchard Hills, which is fabulous. And then also there were sporting events at our high schools. There was a collection table at Matheson School manned by the Bulldog Brigade at their open house, and they were collecting monies also for those in need. And those are just some examples. I mean, it was like our students and staff just jumped into it and said, we have more than we need. Let's try and give to those who are in need because of the hurricane effort. So we're just really proud of them, and it's a real reflection, I think, on Milford, which really all does. The community as well as the schools always talks about giving back, and these are just examples of that. So congratulations to all of them, and we thank them. So we're going to get to the awards this evening, and I'm going to begin with the Unified Sports Program, and I'd like to call up 4 students and 2 of our teachers. If you come up and just stand here with me. So Tiana Albuquerque, Gabby Foster, Tiffany Truini, and Ryan Vieira. These are all foreign high school students. I'm so glad that you're here. And then we're also want to come over this way a little bit, and then that way there'll be a little room. I want to call up 2 teachers, guidance counselor I should say, and teacher from Foreign High, who are the coaches of the Unified Sports Program at Foreign High School, Mr. Rick Riuzzi and Miss Megan Jacobson. It's in the blue in the back here. English teacher at the high school, and Miss Jacobson is a guidance counselor. And we're joined here, I don't know where, but I know Mr. Berkowitz is here, and I know that Anthony Vitale is also here, our athletic director. So I think all of you know about the Unified Sports Program, but I'll speak a little bit about it. We are really excited because Joseph A. Foreign High School's Unified Sports Program has recently been named a National Banner Unified Champion School, which is just fabulous, and we congratulate these representative students from the Unified Sports team. This is a national award sponsored by the Special Olympics International. Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools must have teams that participate in at least 2 sports seasons, must demonstrate inclusive youth leadership, demonstrate whole school engagement, and must ensure the sustainability of all of these components. Unified Sports is a year-round athletic program at Warren. So it's year-round, which means clearly it has more than 2 sports. The program partners student athletes, those with and without an intellectual disability, in athletic competitions with other Connecticut high schools that offer unified sports. Coaches Rick Rayusi and Megan Jacobson have led this program for 5 years at Warren High. Each year they've built upon the program by adding something new. Early on, so going back 4 or 5 years ago, Coach Rayusi and Jacobson were successful in securing a grant that enabled them to host a basketball tournament with 2 other schools. Now, and I think you just had a soccer tournament, I know, but their basketball tournament had 7 schools when they hosted it this last fall, right? Since then, the sports of volleyball, wiffle ball, track and field, and soccer have been added. And as I said, there was just a soccer tournament. I had to miss it, and I was really saddened about that, but I'm sure it was just fabulous. Even with the rain, you pulled it in, from what I understand. They also held last spring, which was just the most exhilarating event that I've been to, a unified prom. So we had kids from 5 different schools, if my memory serves me correctly, came in. Stratford and some of the other towns, as well as Law High School, et cetera, and the kids had a prom, and they had a blast. Were any of you there at the prom? Yeah, good time. I remember seeing you dance. So through the leadership and hard work of the coaches, and also there's a number of paras who are part of this whole program. A wonderful and exciting environment for all the athletes have been created, and that has enabled them to enjoy and to participate again in these sports. Coach Rayusi stated that the support that the program receives from the many paraprofessionals involved continues to make the program run smoothly and grow stronger. And in conjunction with the coaches and parents, Warren itself is extremely fortunate to have such enthusiastic and talented athletes, because without the athletes, we would have no sports team, right? Right. Unified Sports at Warren is truly a team effort. Having been recognized for this national award speaks volumes to the Warren athletes and coaches and the support staff. Again, they are an inspiration to all of us. Warren High School will be recognized on earning this national award on Friday, December 15th at the High School Youth Leadership Summit held in Hartford. At that time, they will be presented with the national banner to bring home and display, presumably in the gym, am I right? Okay, that's terrific. So we want to congratulate all of the athletes and certainly the coaches and the paras and then the administration and staff at Warren High for their incredible support of this program. So to each of our students, we'd like to give you a certificate, and what we'd ask you to do, if you would come and shake the hands, because all these people here would really love to meet you, okay?
Terrific job.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks. Thank you.
Terrific job.
Congratulations.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Good job.
Really great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And our second recognition this evening is actually for one of our teachers. So I'd like to call up Patricia Oresco, who is an art teacher at Matheson Elementary School, and we are thrilled to be able to be honoring her this evening. And unfortunately, Mrs. Oh my gosh, senior moment here, folks. Courier wasn't able to be here this evening, but she's as proud as can be. She already spoke with me earlier today. So let me tell you about Patricia Oresco. Instead of relaxing during the summer, she was deeply involved in the study of modern art interpretation, contemporary art analysis, and carousels. Though at first glance this might seem to be an eclectic mix of topics, the outcome for everyone involved was the same: finding ways to engage kids in the world of art. Ms. Oresco, an art teacher at Matheson Elementary School, was selected as a 2017 Fund for Teachers Fellow to participate in the Connecting Collections for Art Educators Institute workshop. I know that's a mouthful. This summer in New York City. The Institute was sponsored by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Solomon Guggenheim Museum, again, all in New York City. Three of the most famous museums nationally and internationally. Having received a grant of $3,235, Ms. Oresco joined more than 50 art educators across the country in learning techniques for analyzing and interpreting modern and contemporary art. She spent a solid week in going from each one of these museums and spending the full day and immersing herself in art and with other artists, etc. She studied master artists again at the Museum of Modern Art, viewed various artists' works at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Guggenheim, and learned from some of the best museum educators in the world. What is amazing is that this wasn't the only learning that Ms. Oresco pursued this summer. Thanks to an award that she received from the National Endowment for the Humanities, she was one of 72 teachers selected to be a National Education of the Humanities Scholar and participated in a National Landmarks of American History and Culture workshop also this summer. The workshop was held at, I'm not going to know if I'm not, it was Stereo-Hearst?
Yep.
Stereo-Hearst, not bad. If you can spell it, you get a prize. Museum in Holyoke, Massachusetts, where she wrote and completed a project titled Art in Motion, the Carousel. So we're talking about 2 awards that she received to study different kinds of art at different places in the country, which is fabulous. One of the things that Ms. Oresco takes seriously is the concept of learning, and particularly that learning is a lifelong activity. She wants her students to see that too, and that she exhibits or models lifelong learning. She believes teachers are role models for their students, and what better way to show them than by continuing in her own education. As a fellow, she also is going to help other teachers apply, for example, to the program that took place in New York City. She wrote in one of her, I'm not sure if it was a statement you had to submit at the end of the study in New York City, I plan to apply object-based teaching strategies in my K-5 art classroom and during our 5th grade field trip to the local art museum. I will share my learning and exemplary lesson plans with district art teachers during professional learning time. The lessons will be assembled in tubs and kits, which art teachers are really familiar with that kind of, what shall I say, packaging. I will highlight student artwork on the public level during the citywide art exhibition, and I will share the children's books that I purchased through this fund with students, teachers, and administrators as they pursue more art. So we are really proud of Pat Oresco. What a model for us, for all of our teachers in the school system. What a reflection on the Milford Public Schools that she was selected for both of these and that she pursued both of them, giving up portions of her summer. And we're delighted, and I'm anxious to get into your classroom and see the kind of work you're doing with your kids. Thank you.
Congratulations. Terrific job.
Congratulations. Great job.
Great initiative. Great initiative.
Thank you. That's it for student and staff recognition. So we'll move on to student reports. I think Warren High School goes first this month. you?
Okay, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, so as mentioned by Dr. Beezer, we are proud to announce that Foreign was recognized as a Special Olympics national banner.
To interrupt you for a second, you have to speak really loud because of these fans. I'm sorry
Okay.
about that.
So, Foreign was recognized as a Special Olympics national banner champion school under the leadership of Mr. A.C. and Mrs. Jacobson, along with other foreign staff and numerous foreign students. Unified Sports at Foreign has grown into a model for other Connecticut high schools. We believe the success of the program speaks volumes about the respectful and inclusive culture of our school. Foreign Unified Sports will attend the Youth Leadership Summit in December, where they will be presented the national award-winning banner. Congratulations to Unified Sports.
The Main Street Mirror is a beloved student-run newspaper, and it released its first issue during the first week of October. The Main Street Mirror is distributed school-wide and can also be found on Foreign's website, where new issues are published regularly. Our journalism students, under the direction of teacher Mrs. Farrell, will work diligently to create this widely read publication with its student voice and opinion. Main Street Mirror is also on Twitter and Instagram.
Our Natural Helpers Club initiated a drive to support victims of the recent hurricanes. Money and supplies were collected during school and sporting events. And Foreign will donate approximately $500 to the Connecticut Association of Schools Hurricane Relief Fund and a large amount of supplies to those in need.
Foreign's Fit Club planned and executed its first pep rally of this year 2 weeks ago. It was a great representation of school spirit and that all the students embodied. In the nail biter, the junior class was able to bring home the spirit stick for the first time this year.
The 7th and 8th grade open house held on October 5th was a great success. There was a lot of positive feedback, and the 7th and 8th graders came away with valuable information on Foreign, and we hope to see them all next year.
In sports news, our Foreign girls volleyball team has qualified for the state tournament and currently have a record of 9-5. Their senior night will be October 23rd, and we hope to see you there.
The Foreign Innovative Thinkers held a club fair for the students at Foreign on September 12th and 13th. Foreign students were introduced to the wide variety of clubs available at Foreign. This year, Foreign introduced a number of new clubs, including Sign Language Club, the Social Awareness Club, and Glee Club.
On Wednesday, October 11th, the 9th graders will take the PSAT 8 and 9, while the 10th and 11th graders will take the PSAT and /MSQT.
So there have been numerous representatives representing multiple colleges and universities from various states that have come to Foreign to talk to students about their schools. Numerous students have taken advantage of these visits and have gotten specific questions answered, along with being able to meet with college representatives face to face.
The new class offer at Foreign is Humanities. Humanities is a full year honors course that allows students to receive level 1 English credit and history credit. This class recently visited the Irish Hunger Museum in Hamden, which allows students to see how the people of Ireland recognize those who were lost during the Irish hunger famine.
Foreign's New England Association of Schools and Colleges accreditation visit is quickly approaching. The visit will occur from Sunday, October 22nd through Wednesday, October 25th, with a panel presentation and interviews taking place on the 22nd. Last year, Foreign faculty prepared the school's self-study in preparation for the visit. We are looking forward to welcoming the visiting committee, and we hope that you'll be able to present. We hope you'll be able to be present on October 22nd.
Finally, tomorrow, October 10th, the Quintico Marine Band will be visiting Foreign to work with the band students from both Foreign and Law. This is an exciting opportunity for our students to both attend a concert but also collaborate and work with those professional musicians.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Law?
How's it going?
Good, how's it going for you?
Let's see. Should I start it off? Alright, so we'll start off with academics. So, first off, in news from our support center at Law, from the beginning of the school year, the support center has received double the amount of visits from students as the same time last year. And during the starting weeks of the year, the support center staff visited study halls, mostly for freshmen, to introduce them to the whole support center deal and everything, let them know where it is and when they could go. And since then, the center has seen large groups of students that have visited for help with their studying and everything, and has gotten some good feedback from one student who said they actually really helped, and they would have failed half their quizzes if it wasn't for the support center. And let's see. Also in academics, the law and humanities classes, along with Foreign's, just recently visited the Hamden Irish Great Hunger Museum and learned about the history of the Irish Great Hunger and the immigration to America due to it.
In past events, Law just visited Harborside and West Shore Middle Schools to show them about law and help show what law is about. The Interact Club in Devon Rotary hosted their annual Oktoberfest downtown on September 25th. It was a night full of fun and the proceeds went to scholarships for law. Also, just recently, the ball captains for law just went to the Captain's Council at Hill House to learn leadership skills.
In upcoming events, this Thursday at Law, the Kia Club will be holding their fall blood drive in the gym. And also this Thursday, there's going to be a middle school open house at 6 p.m. starting in the auditorium.
In athletic news, Law just got their stats in for last year, academic-wise, for student athletes, and the average GPA for a Law student athlete was 3.53, and the average GPA for a tennis athlete was 4.0. All Law sports teams are currently on track to make states, with Law volleyball with a record of 8-5, qualifying for the state tournament and SECs against Warren last month. While girls soccer is currently undefeated with a record of 8-0-1 and is second in class now.
Alright, so Law Amazing news. Alright, so in Law Amazing news, just recently our news, Eagle Eye News, started back up, and we now have a radio station at Law. I think the link to it is on the school website. It's not nothing big yet, but it's just starting. I think this week DJ Fran is doing a throwback to the 80s show.
Also in Law Amazing news, Senior Cole Egerstein welcomed home his dad, Master Sergeant Joseph Egerstein, at a football game where he was surprised by his dad who was dressed by a referee.
I think that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to public comment, if any of the students that are done with their presentations wish to leave, we won't be offended. You can go home and get your homework started. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, board members.
You're welcome. Thank you for visiting.
Have a good night.
You too. Yeah, I'll read the public comment statement in the event that anybody would like to address the board this evening. Speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and program. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with the Milford Public School System. Security issues and matters relating to negotiations or grievances will not be permitted, and consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, discussion of students is prohibited absent parental waiver. Please be advised our meetings are live on Channel 78 on Cablevision, and we ask that you start by stating your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board this evening for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. I don't have a chair's report tonight, but I do know that there are some liaison reports. Liaison, Dr. Gregory.
So for the Milford Education Foundation, the survey results from the one-day event were exceptionally high. And so the president of the foundation is having a follow-up meeting with Annalise Faziano in mid-October. Evening Under the Stars is being planned for November 3rd. And the mini grant input from Jeff Burt was very helpful, and so the release for the mini grant applications is coming up soon. And finally, a new Milford Education Foundation logo was just approved, and it's stemming from the work of a law senior last year, Thomas Gambardella. He won the logo contest.
Good. What was the one-day event? Again, do you remember? Okay, never mind. Any other liaison reports? Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Permanent School Building Committee met on September 21st. We spent a good portion of the evening talking about West Shore Middle School. The project is moving along. Now this was 3 weeks ago, so any news that we discussed at the time is probably old news by now, but really, in terms of the project, the students are in school and the construction team is working around, you know, the students being in the school the best they can, and they're running everything by Mr. Cavana and Mr. Bradbury to make arrangements to accommodate the fact that the students are in school, but they still need to get work done. As far as other projects, the elementary school roofs that were done over the summer are substantially complete. They're just now to punch list items, and the same for the harborside windows, also substantially complete and just down to punch list.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Weaver? Mr. Whiskeyman?
The ACES will be meeting this coming Thursday, and I expect we will continue our discussions on the impact of the lack of a state budget at this point in time. And obviously they're somewhat concerned about that, given that they're more dependent upon state money than most of the school systems are. I do have the annual report, which I'm going to turn over to administration, ACES, and for your perusal, and hand it over to whoever may find it useful. And that's all I have on that.
Very good. Any other liaison reports? Okay, we'll move on to Superintendent's report, Dr. Fieser.
Thank you, Mrs. Glennon. So we're going to begin this evening with highlighting a new program that's being brought into the schools, a different kind of a program. This actually is a program called Student Tools for Emergency Planning. And I'm going to introduce to the public, and the board already knows, Mr. Jeffrey Nielsen, who's our coordinator of school safety for the district. And he's going to, along with, I think, some students and maybe a teacher or teacher leader, introduce you to this new program that's being brought into the schools.
Thank you, Dr. Fieser. At first, I'd like to thank you and the board, obviously, for allowing us to come out and take some time out of the meeting to talk about student preparedness and emergency management. As you know, my job in the school district is to provide a safe school community, emergency preparedness plans, training on our plan, exercising the plan, and doing feedback and evaluations. That's how we make our programming here stronger in the district. And kids are involved with that in the schools. We do crisis drills, whether it's weather-related, fire-related, maybe an intruder in the building. Our teachers and our kids are doing drills every day in the buildings. So tonight we invited a few teacher leaders. I'll let them introduce themselves in a few minutes, and their students help the presentation just so you can see the importance of this new program we brought to the elementary schools forward. So I'll have Jen, you want to come up?
I'm Jen Raymond, the teacher leader of Pumpkins Delight, and I brought along with me Emily and Brett from Pumpkins Delight.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dixon. I'm from Orchard Hill School, and I brought Katie Vigilante and Jack Sullivan with us to share some of their knowledge.
Great, I'll bring them up in a few minutes. So, and I promised I would be so much short, so I actually scripted myself. If I don't write a script, I'll talk forever. So, but a few things I just want to pass out as we're talking here. So, these are parts of the program. That's our disaster startup kit that FEMA provides us, and I'll talk a little bit about this stuff as you're looking at it. So, Youth Emergency Preparedness Program. We implemented this in our 8 elementary schools. So FEMA, as we've all heard on the news recently, they've been highlighted with the disasters we had in Puerto Rico, Texas, Mexico, and Florida. It's our federal emergency management agency. Their goal is to provide national preparedness with everybody, whether it's adults, children, even involving pets. So this program is very strong. It's, again, it's a national framework that we have. We sat down as a team in 2016. We went through some training classes with some of the teacher leaders, and the state representatives for emergency management actually brought this to our attention and said, you should think about implementing this in your schools. So this year I sat down with the 2 teacher leaders here, as well as the others in our 8 remaining elementary schools, and Annalise Spaziano from Student Development. And we said, what can we do to pilot this program in our schools? We aimed it to our 4th grade classes. STEP is a 4th and 5th grade based curriculum. The program STEP stands for Student Tools and Emergency Planning. The focus of this is family planning. The kids learn a lot of things in school, but they can go home and they're great messengers that talk to their families about the things that we talk about, disaster kits, communication plans, what to do in a disaster. Like everyone here right now, if we pull the fire alarm, what would everybody do?
Run.
Right? We're all trying to do that, right? But what if the door's blocked? We have to go out another alternate route. So again, getting kids thinking about these different types of things. I'm going home being leaders in family preparedness. That's what this program's about. STEP is a free, which is very great for us, nationwide program, and it's again offered through FEMA. They provide us with all the materials. So the bag that I'm passing around there, that's a startup disaster kit. They provide us with flashlights, batteries, Mylar blankets, which basically repel water, but they keep your core warm. A whistle. Don't blow my whistle. It's a startup kit. So this kit could be brought home and they can put what's their family needs in that kit to survive, whether it's for pets, they might have a medical issue at home, food. We've all heard 3 days, 3 ways through FEMA, the commercials they put out there, supplies for 3 days in 3 different ways to survive a disaster. Educating children on the steps they need to take during an emergency is important. We provide them with knowledge, and knowledge is power, as we all know. And if we can build our confidence levels up while reducing anxiety, again, with the internet, social media, and all the stuff we've seen lately with the disasters, there may be students who have family in affected areas, and they're concerned about them. And they're concerned that maybe these stories might come this way. So giving them the knowledge to better prepare themselves and their family at home is something we need to do. Also, the timeliness of this. So September, I don't know if you all know this, it's National Preparedness Month. Anybody know that here?
I did not.
No? Anybody know what October is? What was that? Fire Prevention Month.
I thought I knew.
I'm first better test questions. So you think about all the disasters we've had and the prevention months we have in September and October. This type of training is timely and appropriate for our staff and our students. It's age appropriate. It's been developed through a group of people, through national experts, and they can use this at home, at shopping mall, while they're in school, while they're on vacation. Of course. I once had a disaster guy. So just behind me, if you look at all these different types of things, are we prone to these things in New England? We are. We've had tropical storms, we've had hurricanes, tornado sightings, small ones in the state here, fires. I think Jen will talk a little bit about what students discussed an emergency that they had in their home about a fire. So all these things, we're prone to these. Youth preparedness education. In 2013, the national census, it showed that 25% of our population is under the age of 18. That's a big number. That's a real big number. So why don't we educate these kids so they can go home and help their families prepare plans for emergencies and disasters? So they can be able to identify what a disaster is versus an emergency. And I think the students tonight will come up and talk a little bit about what they've learned in the program, which I think will be the most benefit of the discussion tonight. So, as you can see up here, I won't read off the slide, but this was piloted several years ago. This is a national program now. Originally, it started with a group of educators in Rhode Island, and they felt the need for this. And then they took their ideas, and they met with national subject matter experts to develop this program, which is nationwide. So, I think at this time, I'm going to ask the teacher leaders and their students to come up and talk a little bit about what they've learned.
So the teacher leaders in each building put on a 1-hour presentation for the group of 4th graders. FEMA does provide a binder with kind of a PowerPoint presentation where anyone can kind of pick up and deliver the message to students, but being an experienced group of educators, we felt that we needed to work together to kind of increase the engagement of it because it is a lecture type PowerPoint presentation. So we worked with Jeff, we worked with each other to include some best practices. So we included, turn and talks in there, some modeling. We had first responders come in and do some Q&A with the kids. There was a little writing portion that we included, and of course there was some videos that come along with the program. And then at the end, there is a certificate that the kids receive for going through the program.
Yeah, and I just wanted to preface that with saying we started the presentation with a short video of a young girl about Jack and Katie's age. Her name was Tilly, and through education, she learned to identify the warning signs of a tsunami, ultimately saving hundreds and hundreds of people on a beach while she was on vacation. So that really connected the kids and it really engaged them. And we talked about, when we're at school, we practice. We practice how to evacuate. Can they go home and be leaders in emergency planning? And they all said yes after the program, so we're really proud of them.
So prior to the program, we sent home a parent letter that just communicated with the fourth grade community what the kids would be learning about, a little information where the program came from. And I know some of us in our buildings also after the fact included some information in our newsletter so that the school community beyond the fourth grade knew what was going on. This is just a sampling of what is in the workbook that Jeff passed around. There's lots of tools in there that the kids we exposed to during the presentation. They're then to go home and use those as guides to help lead their family in creating these emergency plans with their family. So here are two examples of some of the sheets that are in that booklet. And I know one of our friends actually went home and made a plan, right, with her family?
Katie.
Okay.
Jack.
Michelle, you just want to talk a little bit about the kit?
Yeah, so as Jeff had mentioned, it comes with the flashlight and the whistle and the Mylar blanket. The kids were very excited. It was the highlight of the program. And then we did take some time for them to do a little pre-planning before they went home, and I think that's the next slide. I actually had, there's a bunch of items on this sheet. What goes in an emergency kit? Soap, needle and thread, Band-Aids, etc. I actually had one of my students circle important paperwork like proof of rental or home insurance. I thought she was so responsible. I was really impressed. Remember that, Jeff?
Oh yeah, there was a few kids that
She
did that.
pulled me out of the water with that, so I was really impressed. And so they did a little pre-planning, and then we shared out a little bit, and they were ready to go and start playing with their families.
We also modeled, and Jeff helped us with that, what would go in each of our family's kits. So what went in my kit would be different from what went in Jeff's kit, which is different from our school kit. So depending on your family needs, we were teaching the kids when you go home, you'll have to put different things in your kit that your family needs. Maybe different medications, pet foods. Jeff put in diapers. So different needs, right?
And I think we also done the fact that some things expire. We put in consideration that, or seasonal changes of clothing. Like you may put, shorts and a tank top in there for the summer, but your bags for the winter, and now you're standing out in 30-degree weather in shorts and a tank top. So a lot of the kids actually picked up on that as well.
Yeah, they did. Okay.
So I think now we'll just kind of let the kids talk and maybe share what you put in your bags and what you spoke to your families about at home. Em, do you want to start? Okay.
So,
Put it up there so they got a lot in there.
so in my bag, I put my STEP program, and I filled it out. I put first aid stuff for if someone gets a cut, then you could clean it. And I put food in it in case you get hungry.
your soup, or did you pack a can opener too?
They're
Hey, did you want to share either your emergency planning with your family or your kids?
I think I'll share our plan first.
Okay, talk nice and loud.
If there were ever a fire in my home, there is a rope ladder under my parents' bed, and we would probably throw it out in my sister's window, as that is the closest to the ground. We would go to our neighbors and call 911. If there were a flood or a hurricane in Milford, and it was like type 1 where we could stay, so it wasn't too bad. We would cover our garage, the entrance of our garage, with sandbags, put things that could get wet up higher, move my parents' cars to higher ground, and if it were the type of hurricane we had to leave our home for, we'd go to my aunt and uncle's in Orange, about 2 miles away, and do the same things, basically. If our electricity was ever knocked out in the summertime, we would be careful to never really open our fridge for that long. If we had to, we do it very quickly, but we have water, flashlights, and food. We're prepared for our electricity to be knocked out in the summer. If it were knocked out in the winter, we have a fireplace. It's run by gas, so it wouldn't stop working. We have blankets and flashlights, food, and water. We'd also have to run our water sometimes so the pipes would not freeze.
Good, very good.
Air.
In my step kit, I added a bunch of more stuff that I might need during a natural disaster. I have my step kit book in there if I need to go over it. I have a garbage bag to throw out all the trash just when I'm done with it. I have a hand crank flashlight that doesn't need batteries and you crank it up. I have water. I have a can opener if I need to open cans. I have matches to make light. I have antibacterial wipes. I have pretzels. I have dog food for my dog. I have like these wet, moist paper towels. I have hamster food for my hamster. And I have the whistle, the flashlight, and the blanket. And then I have a first aid kit. And I have a can of tuna.
Smart. Good job. Excellent plan.
So what I have is I have a lot of food and a lot of water. Basically, I forgot all of the first aid. I was running out of time. We had to do it last second. Food, a lot of water, and we had a lot of bars.
Are those energy bars?
Yeah. And then we have an MRE.
That's a good one.
And then we have batteries for the flashlight. And then we have our whistle, our flashlight, the batteries, and the blanket.
Great.
That's it.
Nice. Very good. All very prepared for an emergency.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I think obviously you can see from the testimonials up here that they've learned a lot from the program. We brought it back to their families. And thank all of you for bringing your children out tonight and taking part in this. It's very important.
Thank you.
So, just to wrap up, just a few slides up here from our first responders. So our police and firefighters, we reached out to them when we started doing this as well and said it'd be very nice for them to come out and be a part of the presentation, which, they didn't hesitate to do that. And we know, in natural disasters, they're the first ones out there meeting with people and bringing them to safe places. So they helped out handing out the kits. Sorry, the slide on the right is cut off, but one of the firefighters actually doing a presentation about fire safety, which is part of the presentation. And then, again, this is the Pumpkin Life School. They're all sitting up at the top there, just congratulating them, handing out certificates. So, again, it's well embraced, and I think we did a good job with this year. The team did. And what we're going to look at now is we have a few more schools that will be rolling into this month. Once they're done, we're going to meet as a team again and evaluate it to see, okay, did it go well? What's feedback from everybody? And what can we do better with this? And then reach out to the state next year to get more kits. It's about 450 kits we went through this round for our fourth graders, and the state will be doing it next year and hopefully years to come. So we look forward to it.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you for coming. Thank you.
So Mrs. Lennon, could we move to the student transportation report and then the enrollment?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a well-prepared kid. Mrs. Griffin has these here. Do you want them handed out?
Yes, could we pass those up? Thank you. Each year in October, we come to you with an update on the transportation system, having just completed beginning of the school year and getting things into place. This has become an annual report to the board. So I'm pleased to report to you tonight on the state of the transportation system in the schools. So, just the statistics. Milford Public Schools provides transportation this year. The number on October 1st was 4,103 students. We transport obviously the 14 public schools, 3 parochial schools, 3 technical vocational schools, and a number of in and out of district special education placements. For that transportation system, we use 61 buses and vans, 44 are in the regular education program, and 17 in the special education program. That's 109 bus runs and 1,011 bus stops. So it's a complicated system that we run day in and day out. Just a reminder that tonight's review is for regular transportation only. The special education transportation is coordinated by the Pupil Personnel Services Department, and that's all of the
special education transportation is on an individual basis. So tonight we're talking about just the regular education system. As you know, since 2005, Durham School Services has been our transportation provider. We have an excellent relationship with Durham. That's based upon proven personalized customer service, proven safety record, and very competitive pricing. We came to you last year at this time and gave to you a survey of school districts throughout the state, and recommended to you that we renew the contract with Durham for an additional 5 years, and the board approved that. And one of the main reasons, beyond the experience piece and the excellent relationship that we have, is that the pricing was extremely competitive. And so we just gave you the cost per bus, the 16-17 bus, and the cost for the 17-18 school year, which is 3%, which the board approved in the Durham contract. Okay, so there was one change to the transportation system this year, and or something that affected the transportation system this year, and that was new school hours. As you know, the board approved new start times. The high school stayed the same. There's 40 minutes in between each level. Middle schools start 40 minutes after high schools, and then the elementary schools 40 minutes after the middle schools, and that now allows all 8 elementaries to start at the same time. Previous to this, as you know, we had 2 different start times for elementaries, 4 at one time and 4 at another time. It's much more consistent, it's much more favorable to have all 8 elementaries at the same time. And so the new change this year allowed the district to do that. What that means, it's had a beneficial effect for transportation, to allow 40 minutes between windows. And we went through great pains last year to explain to you why the 30-minute window was the major constraint on some of the efficiencies in transportation. Just 10 minutes, and we'll talk about it later on in the presentation, just 10 minutes makes a tremendous amount of difference. Buses are able to travel further. When they travel further, they can pick up more students. We can put more students on each bus, which reduces the number of runs, and that equates to more efficiency and ultimately savings. Just some the raw numbers broken down for you. I gave you the numbers earlier, and this is just broken down by level. You can take a look at them. We go into greater detail later in the presentation. This is the number of stops. So this is the effect on the 40-minute window. And you can see in 2016-17 we had a total of 119 runs. In the 17-18 school year, we've reduced that by 10 runs. When we say runs, we mean a route. Every bus has a route that it takes to pick up the kids and get them to school. They need to do that within a 40-minute window of time. And as you can see, we've reduced the high schools by 3, middle schools by 2, elementaries by 4, and our parochials by 1, for a total of 10 less routes in the system this year. We have, again, a reduction of 10 bus runs. That's offset, the number of bus runs is offset by the fact that because we had all elementaries starting at the same time, we actually needed more buses, we needed more tiers because, let me explain this. Each bus, we are most efficient when that bus runs 3 runs. It does a high school run, a middle school run, and elementary school run. We were able to do that before when we had 4 tiers. Now with only 3 tiers, more of our buses are on make 2 runs as opposed to 3. So we needed more buses on the elementary level. So that offset the 10 buses, but overall, we believe that we will have the efficiency of 2 buses, which equates to approximately $98,000 savings to the district this year as a result of moving forward with the new start times and enforcement equipment. Moving on now, one of the programs that the board adopted when it revised its policy several years ago was an opt-in program. And what this is the in 2015-16, the board decided to consolidate bus runs and also to crack down, so to speak, on non-eligible riders who were previously riding the buses. And so when we did that, as a way of mitigating that, the board decided to adopt an opt-in program. And what that means is students who are ineligible, otherwise ineligible for busing, based upon the 1 mile for elementary, 1 mile for middle school, and 1.5 miles for high school, when students are ineligible, they now can apply to opt in to get on a bus at another, and they're able to. They would have to get to a stop. So the application, they make application yearly. It depends upon if there's seats available on existing buses. It depends upon whether or not the bus does not have to deviate, and if it will not have an adverse effect, such as cost, timing, efficiencies, etc. And up until now, it's been as of October 1st, students are able to opt into that bus if there's room on the bus and they're able to meet those conditions. All families were notified of the program availability prior to the start of school via the school messenger and also on the website. I know that was a concern of board members in the past that some students didn't know about it. This year, actually this is the 2nd year, prior to the start of school, we do a school messenger to every household, making them aware of this program. I put an asterisk next to the October 1st because currently the way the policy states, it says that the program will not take place prior to October 1st. We're going to propose to you, as you know, you're reviewing all policies, and when the transportation policy takes its turn in reviewing policies, we're going to recommend that we change it to no later than October 1st. This year we had a very smooth start to the school year. The transportation system ran very smoothly right off the bat, and so we were in a position to grant the opt-in students places on the bus prior to October 1st. In the future, that wording of no later than October 1st will allow us to be able to do that. And that'll be a benefit to those students who apply to opt into the program. Here's the numbers for opt-in. The board has been interested in the numbers. And as you can see, I won't go through each one, but it's broken down by school, how many students opted in this year, and what change it was from the 16-17 school year. Basically, 40 students chose to apply. All 40 students were accommodated, and that's 3 less students than the 16-17 school year in the opt-in program. Moving along, word about fuel. We've talked about in the past that we had several years ago we had changes in the way that we purchased gasoline and diesel fuel, and that had a tremendous effect, as you're going to see. Durham installed a diesel tank on its property, which allowed us to buy diesel utilizing the city's locked-in bid price for diesel fuel. In addition, we began using the gasoline tanks to fuel the buses that are gas-fired at the Public Works Yard, again allowing us to bid the pricing with the city, economy and scale, and we got tremendously better prices. Also, we've been really benefited by the drop in fuel prices, although, as I'll show, the current price actually went up slightly, 14 cents for this current fiscal year. So as you can see, in the 13-14 school year, which was the high mark, the board spent $298,000 plus on fuel for the buses. And in 16-17, unbelievably, the board spent $50,908 for a total savings of $247,000, almost $250,000, or 83%. So I think that's again, it's the fuel prices is really what's driving that. But the ability to buy at a locked-in price really aided us in that. So that's a success story, and I'll reiterate that a little bit further on in the presentation. So that's where the system is today. You know, I think that as I said, things went extremely smoothly this year. Normally, in a normal year, the transportation office would log about 185 calls, either questions, requests for clarifications on bus stops, or appeals. That would be a normal year. In the year when the board did consolidations and changed the walking routes, we had almost 800. So by comparison, this year we were under 50. So I would consider this year to be extremely smooth in the transportation office, and I think that's kind of borne out by you know, the changes that have taken place over the years, which I'm going to highlight here. You know, have kind of smoothed themselves out, and the system has smoothed itself out. But I want to show you some where we were and how we've gotten to here, what I call by the charts. And it's just a reiteration of what I've showed you before: the riders, the runs, the stops, gasoline prices, and the budget. So this is hard to see, but it's more clear in your package. Each year since the 2011-2012 school year, the board has made changes in the transportation system, which I think the board should feel really good about when I show you at the end where we are. The board should feel really good because we now have what I believe to be an extremely efficient. We thought it was efficient back then, but we've achieved much greater efficiencies, and we're saving money in doing so. So and as you can see, I won't go through each one because the board's heard these in the past, but in the 12-13 school year, the board reduced the transportation budget by $200,000. Didn't say how to do it, but tasked the administration in cutting costs, and at the same time, they brought on a consultant called TASK, Transportation. I forget the name, but we'll call it TASK, to do a comprehensive study of the transportation system. That was in 12-13. In 13-14, the board voted to implement the recommendations of the TASK report. In 14-15, one of those recommendations was to remove the non-eligible students who had previously been riding the bus by no fault of their own. But over the years, non-eligible students had crept onto the buses, and for varying reasons. But in fairness to the students who were non-eligible and were not taking a bus, the recommendation was, and the board adopted, to remove the non-eligible students from the buses. Which, and again, then implemented the opt-in program, which helped in a small way to mitigate that. In 15-16 was the reconfiguration and redistricting year, which actually added students, which lowered the number of students riding the bus, because before, on the elementary level, you had students from one end of town being bused to their sister school and vice versa. So many, a very high percentage of elementary school students were being bused prior to the reconfiguration. So when we redistricted and reconfigured back to the K-5, that had the effect of actually lowering the amount of students taking the bus. The following year, in the 16-17 school year, the board voted to lower the walking distance guidelines for middle school and high school, which had the effect of putting a number of students back on the buses. And then again in 17-18, the board changed the start time. So that's where you see where there's either dips or peaks. There's reasons for that. And so just, again, I won't go through, we're not going to talk about, go into detail about year by year, but I just wanted to show you the trend in where we are. So the number of riders in 11-12 was 5,130, and today we have 4,113 riders on the bus, which is a decrease of 22% of riders. Now, a big piece of that is declining enrollment. There's less students that are being bused because there's less students in the system, but also the task report and the implementation of that resulted in the number of riders going down. Number of bus stops. This was due to consolidations. The task report stated that compared to industry standards, we had nearly 2/3 more bus stops than what the industry standard was. And so the recommendation was, where it's safe to do so, to stretch those bus stops out further and have more students walk to a bus stop in a reasonable distance, and if it were safe to do so. And you can see that had a tremendous effect on the number of bus stops, from a high of 1,900 down to where we are now at just over 1,000, for a 47% decrease of the number of bus stops. Bus runs, as we talked about, 11-12, 156, and we're now at 109. I already talked about the fuel costs, but it's actually an 83% decrease from 13-14 to the 16-17 school year. And budget. This is these are the costs, the actual expended costs that are in the blue from the 2011-12 school year to last year 16-17. If we had continued and made no changes, we could have expected that, because the Durham contract went up 3% per year, we could expect that transportation costs would go up 3% per year if we made no changes at all. And so it's somewhat of a leap, but if we had done nothing, we anticipate that prices would have risen by about 16% over that time period. And as you can see, from 11-12 to 16-17, we've actually had a 1.8% decrease overall in the transportation costs. And so what I would say is that due to the efforts of the board and due to some hard decisions that the board made over the years, we now have a very smooth running, a very efficient transportation system. Again, borne out by, I think, the decreased number of calls to the office this past year. I think that the board should feel good about that. I'm going to stop there and answer any questions I have.
Questions, Mrs. Krasinski?
Yeah.
How full?
Mrs. Brzezinski?
Oh, I'm sorry. All I heard was the ski.
Just a couple of things. One is on the non-student opt-in program. Last year's report said there were 35 students.
Correct.
And this year 40, so wouldn't that be an increase in 5, not a decrease in 3?
No, because it's a snapshot in time.
Okay.
So we add students throughout the year.
Okay.
So at that time, when I presented the report to the board, there were 35 or whatever the number was back then. But during the course of the year, that number rose to 43.
Okay. All
So
right. And then last year when we did the bus contract, there were a couple of things. There's supposed to be a parent app. Has that been implemented? Will that be implemented?
it will be implemented. It has not been implemented. It will be implemented. Durham is working on the technology, but we wanted to get the school system, the school up and running. It's definitely.
Is it coming this year?
It will be.
Okay. And also that Durham was going to replace 10 new vehicles each year, so do we have 10 new buses this year?
We do.
Mr. Jagosinski?
Okay. Any feel for why the opt-in program is the numbers are so low?
I think it's probably just conjecture on my part, but I think a vast majority of parents drive their students to school and aren't going to, and whether there's an opt-in program or not, are not going to change that. I mean, that's just conjecture on my part, but the program's there, we let people know, but we only get 35 to 45 students in the past 2 years.
That's one of my concerns, looking at the schools in the morning, there are a tremendous number of cars, and, that doesn't really seem to be a very safe situation. The capacity on our buses, do you have any feel for how close we are to 100%?
Yes, we do a ridership audit 3 times a year. There's actually one going on this year, and then one, I believe, in January, and then again in April or May. So we try to get to 3 seasons because there's, particularly in the high schools, the athletic seasons really affect the number of kids that are riding the buses. I can tell you that the efficiency before the 40-minute window in some buses, because we were constrained by that 30-minute window, some buses were 50%. But it depends really on the bus. It depends on what route that bus takes. And I use this as an example. A route that goes to Orange Avenue School and is in North Milford has to cover a lot of terrain in that 40-minute window. So they're not able to get to as many students in that 40-minute window. So that bus has a lower number of students on it. Whereas there's one particular route that's in the more densely populated area around the beaches, that one stop, 50 students get on the bus. So, and that takes, 10 minutes to get to school. So it really depends on the route, it depends on the locations of their homes, it depends on traffic, because if it's on a busy street where there's traffic, they can't go as far as they can in a 40-minute window. That's the constraint. But with the consolidations and knowing what the ridership is on those buses, we've put more students on the buses than we know we'll be able to pick up in that 40-minute window, because we know that there's a certain percentage that are just not going to be on that bus. We have a much greater ridership in the mornings than we do the afternoons, and that would be because there's after-school activities and things like that. But you have to save a seat based on the number in the morning, because you just don't know, and it varies, like I said before, by season. So we look at those ridership audits very carefully, and we try to take a chance. We know those densely populated areas, those buses are going to be full, but where we have some leeway, we put more students on the bus than really can be accommodated, knowing that we're not going to have a full bus anyway.
I guess one of the things I'm thinking here is there an opportunity to put more kids on the buses and reduce the number of cars coming in. Again, adjusting, you know, the distances so that we would take on more kids without increasing our costs.
Well, we try, that's the whole point of it, but I keep going back to, because it is, the restraining factor is the 40-minute window. It depends, that dictates how many students you can pick up in that 40-minute window of time. And when it was 30 minutes, it was that much more constraining. And we agree with you. We would love to have all the students that are eligible on those buses and try and free up some of the congestion around the schools. But I believe, you know, I said this 5 years ago that we were efficient, but I really do believe that we have buses that are reaching you know, our maximum potential of efficiency for the number of kids we can put on those buses.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
Excuse me. So if I heard you correctly, we're oversubscribing on some of the buses?
We are.
The airlines kind of approach. What happens if we have a student who's standing there and there's no room on the bus?
Well,
do we accommodate that student in some fashion, I would hope?
We do. We're in constant contact with Durham. I mean, if there's a problem like that, Durham reports it to us immediately and we make the adjustments. That happens in the beginning of the year. The first couple of days of school, it doesn't happen often. But we can experience that and we make the adjustments to bus routes. We've had to, I don't believe this year, but in past years we've had to add a bus route or a bus run because we just couldn't get the number of students we were trying to get onto that particular bus.
I was more concerned about the immediate students standing there. What do we do? Put them on a cab?
No.
Send out a limo? What do we do?
No, we can always squish one more student on the bus. I can assure you that we never reach the maximum number of students that are allowed on a bus. We have 71 passenger buses and 83 passenger buses, and obviously you can fit many more elementary school students than you can high school students on those buses. But I'm not aware of any situation where there hasn't been an available seat.
I was just thinking of the airlines where you get bumped, you know.
No.
Free pass. Right, bus free.
Get the next bus, right?
We don't make the kids pay for the seat.
If it were that close, Durham would let us know that morning, and by the afternoon we would make an adjustment.
My next question is, how many parents have complained about their children spending too much time on the bus? You know, as the length increases, some parents will get concerned that now my kid is spending 40 minutes on the bus instead of 30 minutes on the bus, you know, and that sort of thing.
Honestly, this year the number's less than a handful. We've gotten very few complaints about the children being on the bus longer than
too
what
long.
parents had expected them to be.
Any questions? Mr. DeGrego?
Mr. Riccitelli, I appreciate that word you said, snapshot. It's very descriptive. You figure a snapshot of September 1st to October 1st. Now, the children in my district, along with Wheeler's Farm, no, not Wheeler's Farm, Wolf Harbor, they come out from Ash Drive and they wait for the bus. It's a way to streamline because, like you said, it's the north end of Milford. Now, on September 1st, children get picked up in the Great River Golf Course area, say. But parents have called to me and expressed concerns. You know, they should get picked up on this side or that side. And I gotta say, 10 out of 10 parents that call your office always are satisfied with a workable solution from your staff. I have to tell you that. Because when I follow up and I say, how's Johnny getting to Matheson or Orange, they worked it out. They worked it out. He's getting picked up here. Instead of the bus picking him on this corner, it's gonna make a turn. And over the years, you guys have been right on with that. And as a member of the East Shore Project with you, I know safety is your #1 issue. No matter what you do, safety is always there, and it's always the dictator of what your final decision will be. And I have no problem with your office or your staff. over the years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Richatelli, just a few questions on the presentation, just some things I want to make sure I'm clear on. When you talked about the reduction of 10 bus runs, right, and then the tiers,
Yes.
I got a little confused. So,
It's confusing.
so we still need fewer buses, right, because of the reduction of 10 runs?
We
But not
actually-
as many as we would expect because we went from 3 tiers to 2 on some
Correct.
buses. Is that?
Correct. If we just decide, if we took the reduction of 10 routes, you would expect, and if we could do 3 routes, 3 routes or 3 runs
Yep.
per bus, you would expect that we'd have 3 buses that we'd be able to reduce. But because we don't have 4 tiers, not every bus can make the 3 tiers like they could before. So they're making 2 tiers, especially the parochial school buses. Because they travel longer distances and things like that, those buses are only able to do a parochial school run and then elementary school run, because the parochial schools are on the same tier or the same time as the middle schools.
Okay.
They're not able, the elementary schools cannot utilize a bus that has come from a high school, because their window is actually longer than 40 minutes. So there's less 3-tier buses, which mitigates the amount of, the number of buses from 3 to 2. We still
Okay.
believe that we'll be able to reduce by 2.
Okay, so it would have been 3, but it's 2. Okay.
Correct.
And when you said 4 tiers, you meant 4 bell times. When we had 4 bell
yes.
times, it's confusing using tiers for 2 different
Yes.
purposes. There's 4 bell times, now we have 3 bell times.
Correct.
So that versus,
I just wanted to, last year when we had 4 bell times, or 4 tiers.
4 bell times.
Did the parochial school buses, were they able to do 3 tiers, or were they still only able to do 2 tiers?
In some cases, they were able to do 3, because they were on their own separate times, which was in between the high school and the middle school. And so they went from a parochial school to a early elementary to a late elementary, in some cases. Some of them still had 2 tiers, only 2 tiers.
Okay. On the opt-in program, you said this year you could have started earlier, but you did not because of the policy?
Not because of the policy, no. We actually thought that we could start earlier this year.
Okay.
But we ended up being right at the time limit. But we hope in the future that we'll be able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we want the ability to be able to do that.
Okay, and that policy will come up before next fall, right?
Yeah, I would hope that
It wouldn't stop
that
us.
one little thing in the policy wouldn't stop you from doing it earlier if you could, so.
All right. Next question, also on the opt-in program. Did you have students that applied that were denied?
No.
Okay.
Everyone was accommodated.
Okay. That wasn't always the
And-
case, right?
Correct. There
Okay.
were, in the past, there were, again, less than a handful, but there were students who, and this year, to be honest, to Mr. Wiskeven's point, some of the buses are at their upper levels, and you know, it was really touch and go, but we said, yes, we're gonna take the chance, and put the student on the bus, hoping that there's, and based upon our history, it's been fine.
Okay.
Other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more.
All right.
On these slides where you're showing the phasing, like year over year with the charts, you have 2013-14 tasks implemented, and then the next year remove non-eligible students.
Yep.
So what's the difference between tasks implemented and remove non-eligible students?
In the 13-14 year, we began consolidating routes. We began limiting the number of stops, but we didn't remove non-eligible students until the following year.
Okay.
Because we did a study. We had a traffic safety specialist actually go bus stop by bus stop to determine whether or not there was a safe walking route. Because if there's not, we can't remove the non-eligible student from the bus. As you know, that if there's not a safe walking route, that student's eligible for the bus, even if they live outside the walking distance guidelines. So that was the delay 1 year of removing the non-eligible students, because we had to make sure that there were safe walking routes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you about the 50 students at one bus stop. Is that seriously 50 students at a bus stop? So would you I think that could be a safety hazard in and of itself, having 50 kids waiting inside the street.
We separate them. We have them
Okay.
actually go to different corners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's actually becomes almost two bus
different
stops?
bus
All right.
stops, yeah.
Okay.
But it's from the same concentrated
Right,
neighborhood.
yeah, okay, all right. Any other questions for Mr. Richitelli? All right, thank you very much.
I'm going to return now to the enrollment report, which is on October 1, as you well know, is the date at which we have to submit officially our enrollment, pre-K through 12 to the state. So Mr. Richitelli is going to address that, and you're getting a revised copy.
Does everybody have a copy of the revised report? So one of the things, if you notice in our original report, if you take a look at Live Oaks in kindergarten, there's 48 students in 2 sections for 24 students, which was above our class guidelines from the board. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that, in years past we had done that, but we wanted to make sure we were clearly laying out how that impacts. One of those, Jim. So we've added a column and the new on the new sheet that was handed out to you. We've added a column. In this case, it was for kindergarten classes. We have a primary development or a self-contained kindergarten class. And so if you see in the Live Oaks, we've pulled out 9 students out of that total number of 48. It still ends up with the total number. But when we pulled out students from the other 2 kindergartens, we discovered there was an overlap by 1 student. So if you look at Orange Avenue, on the original sheet, it was 68, but if you add 62 and the 5 in that new column, it's 67. So we had one extra student overlap there, and then the same thing at Orchard Hills. So if you go all the way to the bottom, where it says district total enrollment, on the original it was 5758. And the new number is 5756 because of those 2 adjustments to those students. So just to point a few things out, we are still down, as I pointed out in the agenda item. We're down approximately 120 students compared to last year's October 1 enrollment. To give you a sense by level, year-over-year difference for elementary is 23 fewer students at the elementary level, 72 fewer students at the middle school level, and 30 at the high school level. One of the other things we can point out would be 9th grade. They're seeing a larger number of 9th grade students than we anticipated. One of the reasons was we had fewer students leaving us to go off to in a different direction in 9th grade. We've ranged, although it's within our typical range, we've ranged over the past 6 years between 8 and 16%. This was closer down to the 10% range. We had estimated a little bit more than that on recent trends. And also we had a few students that were retained back from their sophomore year into freshman year, so a slightly larger group in the freshman year at this point. But if there's any other questions, if there's something specific you'd like me to address, I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Questions? So this becomes our official state reporting numbers,
Correct.
right? So, Ms. Federico?
So just on your comment about the expectations for next year, the 8th grade classes right now sum up to 460. So you're saying you would expect about 10% to not carry forward to 9th grade?
Approximately,
10 to 15%?
approximately 46 students.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs.
That's
Krasinski?
okay.
No?
I just happened to notice when I was looking at this that Meadowside, it just seemed an anomaly to me that the kids that went from 1st to 2nd grade, there were like 12 students that didn't move from 1st to 2nd grade at Meadowside. That seems to me like a lot for one grade in one school. Do we ever ask parent, or do we know why parents leave? Like, did 12 move out of the district, or?
There are a number of families in Meadowside who may be here for working in various corporations or with the hospitals or the universities. So there are some families who are here maybe for a year or two, and then they're either transferred or they may go back to their country that they came from, etc. So there's probably greater movement, I think, in Meadowside maybe than most of the other schools in the district.
Yeah, I just thought that was a large number for one grade.
I don't remember
From what
Ms.
grade to
Price
what
saying.
grade? Which
From
grade? From
1st to 2nd, I
Oh,
think it
yeah.
was.
So
Yeah,
you said it
1st
was
to 2nd.
62 before?
Last
Yeah.
year's first grade was 62.
Last year's first grade was 62, and this year it's 50. 2nd grade is 50. I just thought that was a big number. I was just curious as to, just stood out
And yet
to
this
me.
past week, they registered 3 new students came into the district. So there's greater
Yeah.
fluctuation, I think, there.
Okay. I was just curious.
My recollection from my days at Meadowside was that there was always a lot of transients and a lot of fluctuation in the enrollment. There were a lot of new apartments in the community. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the budget assumptions, priorities and assumptions. So this is being brought forth to you for a second reading. And a month ago, we all thought that we would have a state budget. A month later, but that's not the case. So right now, the budget assumptions, these and priorities reflect the changes that you requested. So you requested arts be added on the priorities around sustaining the core instructional program. So you've included that. And then with respect to the assumptions, the fourth one from the bottom, you asked that we strike from the narrative there, some of the cost of electricity will be offset by anticipated solar installations, but it's too early to project potential savings, so we took that out. So these are the budget priorities and assumptions. Again, we are so cognizant of the fact that we are bringing these forward to all of you, and yet we feel like we're operating in a vacuum because we have no state budget. And depending upon what results when there is a state budget, some of these could really be called into question, just because if there were significant reductions that came forth from the state. So we're really cognizant of it and frustrated, as I'm sure you are as a board, but we only can operate right this moment with what we know. And so this is what we know at this point.
Mr. Jagosinski?
Have you given any thought to what we would do if there was a significant decrease in our budget?
You can be assured we've been giving thought to that. I mean, and seriously, I mean, we have from the perspective of, the what-if scenarios, and, we've thought about what if the state budget for this current year were to be reduced? What are the implications of that for us this year? We are thinking that it's really going to be next year at this point, since it's already almost halfway through October. But we've thought about that, and then we clearly have thought about 2018, a number of scenarios. We're really worried. We even spoke today about the fact that here it is October. We gave to all of the principals their budget books to begin to start to develop their budgets. The elementaries, I think, are due October 20th. shortly thereafter is the middle and the high school, and yet we're in a holding pattern with respect to the state, and then we think about, so what happens if, December 25th, the state budget comes through, and we've already created our budget. I mean, so yes, we've been giving lots of thought to it, but not having any knowledge as to even an inkling of, well, in which direction is the state going to go, we're just on pause.
And this is not eventually going to be a state decision, but really a city decision, because
Yes.
it really represents a decrease in their revenue rather than a direct hit to our budget. It's what the eventually aldermen are going to vote on.
Depending upon how much the city is
Right.
reduced, that's correct.
So as a board member, I would say that I think it's important that we stay focused on the needs of the district and, without being extravagant, but, what do we really need to keep the district moving forward? And, base our, I think our budget numbers should be based on that. That's my personal opinion. What might happen with the allocation of dollars by the Board of Aldermen, down the road is kind of to me, it's a separate issue from the budget that we present, that we approve, and we present to them as reflecting the true needs of the district, because that's really always what we've said that we are doing. So.
I guess what we thought is that by now, we would have known what the state budget is, and therefore we would have known from the city side what is the expectations for us with respect to building the budget for next year. So it's those kinds of scenarios that we've, we created some last year at the request of the mayor, although, no one saw those, but it's also with the idea of just wanting to build a budget that's based upon the actual figures that we know we're gonna have to work with, so.
Any other questions before we act on this? This is the second reading, so if there's no other questions, we'll have a motion to approve this.
Yep, all right, I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the 2018-2019 budget priorities and assumptions as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Whiskeyman?
Just a question, if we do get some answers in terms of the budgetary questions before the state at this point in time, and we're able to ascertain some sense of direction and how that affects these assumptions, I would hope we could come back and reopen the question if necessary, if we have time on these assumptions, that this isn't necessarily final, depending upon, what, I just want to express that thought that should it become necessary, we may have to come back and revisit these assumptions based upon whatever the state does.
I don't know, personally, I just don't see that really plays a part in what we are saying as a board are our priorities. I think that as a board, we need to be focused on, again, what the needs of the district are and present a budget that reflects that. I think that, in terms of the assumptions, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. So, I mean, while certainly it could be brought back, I don't see that the two really have a lot to do with one another in terms of what the budget is that we're putting together.
Well,
Mr.
in January, we go through a line item, so we'll be able to make those adjustments then.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just think just looking at the priorities, okay, I agree, the priorities are still our priorities, right? But if there's some really difficult decisions to be made by administration, then maybe they may need to come to us for some guidance to say,
correct. Yep.
Okay, these are your priorities, but what, can you order them? Can you shift some things around because there's drastic decisions to make? So I think we could always have that conversation
as needed. discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is a first reading for the proposed district academic targets. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Burt to take the lead on this.
Thank you, Dr. Fieser. As you recall, we met 3 weeks ago in a workshop to go over a draft of the targets, and through a very constructive conversation throughout the evening, we got good feedback from the board, and we hope that we've captured the feedback on these revised targets. So if, for the most part, page 1, 2, and 3 are, and 4 are similar, are the same as when we handed them out 3 weeks ago. We did add in on page 5, which is 15, depending upon which way you're looking at it. If you're looking at it sideways like I am, it's page 5. If you're looking at it the other way, it's page 15. We did add back in the district goals as an overview. And then starting on page 6 is again, it's the same numbers as you recall from the previous workshop. The feedback we received from the board was to, they wanted to, we wanted to see the 2015 actual results if available. And again, they're not available for all of the data that we're about to show you. We did start with the 2016, and as you recall, we had the 2020 goal. And then another request was to see the fill in the blanks in between for 2017, 2018, and 2019. So let me walk you through page 6. That's a Word document, I'm sure. Yeah, well, look at that. All right. Okay. So on page 6 here, this is the other thing we did is we grouped reading together and math together instead of the grades, so you can get a sense, similar to what we did with the data presentation 2 weeks ago. So on page 6, this is reading, and you recall year over year means same grade, different students. And this is based on our goal, our 10-year goal starting in 2016 to 2026. And the overall goal is 85%, and this is at the cut score, the benchmark, or the state goal. In other words, at grade level. So to walk you through that top line, grade 3, this is Smarter Balanced Reading. All students in 2015, we had 54.4% of our students at goal. In 2016, 60%. And then 2017, we've split that into 2 columns. We have the actual, which is 59.4, and then the benchmark, based on the 5-year goal there. So the actual was 59.4%, and the benchmark was 62.5. You can see for 2018, the benchmark is 65.0. For 2019, the benchmark is 67.5, and then the goal is 70 in 2020. And again, this is Smarter Balance. This is the spring of 2020, just to be clear. And then we did the same thing for we separated out high needs students. If you recall, high needs would be students with disabilities, ELL students, as well as students eligible for free and reduced lunch. We've done the same thing for grade 7, Smarter Balanced Reading, and filled in all the numbers. So I'm going to pause here on this page just to see if there's any questions, is there anything unclear, and also to get feedback in terms of the format. Is this the direction that we hope we captured from the suggestions from 3 weeks ago?
One thing that I recall, I would personally like to see the word benchmark under each year, so 2018, just so that it's very clear. Because one thing we did talk about was going forward, that as different people are looking at this, that there's not an assumption that these are actual targets in those years, but it was like, we talked about different words that could be used, but it's like a reference point almost. It's not necessarily, the target is 2020 is where we're looking at. So I'd like to see, I think that would be more clear to have that noted, and I don't know if you want to think about putting a definition of what is the purpose of the benchmark. It's like a reference point or whatever. That I would leave up to you if you feel it needs, if you're more comfortable with having it defined. But I do think that should be on all the forms, all the pages. I think 2018 and 2019 should also have the ENCH after it. underneath it.
Thank you.
Is that in line with what board members remember us talking about last?
Yeah, I
at the
agree,
workshop? Yeah.
that helps out the benchmark does.
Any other comment, Mrs. Kuzinski?
And just graphically, I would say that if it were this year, how you have it in a lighter italic font, the same thing with 2018 and 2019 for now, just so it reads as not being the actual score.
Ms. Federico?
I was just gonna offer a suggestion on the coloring, so the 15 and 16 actual are that bright blue with the white font. I would consider maybe doing the same thing for 17 actual, so we know we're looking at actual.
Dr. Gregory?
So this is different, it wasn't brought up last time, and so I apologize for that. High needs is aggregated by the state, so I get that, why you'd wanna have it aggregated. But the groups that make up the high needs, where it wouldn't identify the students, it might be helpful to see those breakouts, because I imagine that there's, while the needs are high, they're very different within the groups that are aggregated into that segment. So it could be useful, I mean, feel free to disagree, colleagues, but.
Do you have a?
Sure. We've gone back and forth with the state on this and taken their advice. It really is based on the fact that many times some of those students overlap with the other groups, and this is to identify areas we want to make sure we pay attention to. Once you start separating out, I can't guarantee that there would be any data because it might be too small, and we would follow the guidelines from the state in terms of a representative size. I believe it's 20 now is the minimum number that we would need to identify any students. So we really went with, the state went back and forth on this for a number of different ways, and to be honest with you, we couldn't separate out, we do not get free and reduced lunch students eligible for that as an independent indicator anymore. We do get the students with disabilities and ELL, but that is no longer separated out in our reports. So we've really taken the state's guidance and how they're reporting out to separate out this larger subgroup.
Any other questions? Mr. Jagosinski?
The non-high needs figure, is that a state figure? Do they break that out?
Yes, yep. Interestingly enough, when we get our Smarter Balance reports or our SAT reports, however, I believe on the accountability report, they have all students and then separate the subgroup, so the subgroup is actually in the all students. So I think they're taking some feedback on that. It's confusing. That's why we separate them out to get it. This is where our gap lies. It should be between the high need students and the non-high need students. That's where we should identify any kind of gap to ensure that we're doing everything we can to meet the needs of all students.
Any questions?
And if I could provide some feedback on the coloring, the lighter color was to indicate benchmark throughout until you hit the goal. So, and if we did a darker color, lighter color, it would be kind of candy striped. I'm not sure how visually appealing that would be over 3 years. Just throwing it out there.
Okay. As long as we could clearly indicate what's actual and what's benchmark, yes.
I think the darker bolded colors and then the italicized might be beneficial visually.
Dr. Gregory?
To that end, wouldn't it save money to just have it be in black and white? Because then you wouldn't be printing everything out in color, just black and white, bold versus italics, and done.
We do mostly electronics. This is printing out for this meeting, So, and if we do a report, most likely it'll be a PowerPoint, and we can print out the PowerPoint in black and white.
Any other comments? Okay.
So the next page is math, very similar. We can do the same formatting as suggested. again, year over year, goal is 85%. This is, again, percent of students at the grade level or goal level. And the shade, we can make the same changes as suggested on the previous page.
Questions on this?
Okay, next page. This is that, that growth indicator. And the feedback we received from the board was that we had a separate table for grade 4. Those are students, those were actual matched cohort students going from grade 3 to grade 4. And then we had a separate table for those students moving into grade 7. The feedback was, can we get a summative, or an aggregate, if you will, of all the growth for grades 4, 5, 6, and 7. So this is all of those students this past spring. And again, this is a matched cohort, so they must have been in Milford in the previous year, in the spring of 2016, to receive this score in the spring of 2017. And again, this is based on the state goal of trying to have 100% of the overall average of the target achieved. So we want to move our students closer to 100%. As you recall, each individual student gets an individual target. Could be 88 points, could be 20 points, and depending upon how many points they got out of that original number, they get a percentage, and we average that all together. So this, again, shows that you cannot have a group of students that's in the lower end or one end of the spectrum, if you will, or the scale, that's not moving. We have to move all students because every single child that is in the matched cohort is counted towards this. So every student who is currently sitting in grade 5 through 8, because this was last year, was matched in this group. So hopefully this met the feedback.
Dr. Gregory?
The formatting, lovely. Do you have any ideas on why perhaps the 2017 actual scores for reading are lower? Any guesstimates on what might be going on with that?
Well, again, this is from the data report from last week. We saw that overall we did lose in this area, but comparatively to our DERG districts and to the state, we actually did a little bit better than they did. So we are waiting to hear back from the state as to was there something different with the assessment? Was there an overall adjustment? Was there a change in the formula? We don't know. It's a change in the scale score or something, because it was a dramatic shift across the entire state. And I believe in this area it was up to about 8 to 9 points for the state average went down. So we are right in the ballpark with the state, as well as the 4 comparison districts that we use for our report. So we're very similar to the district. So if I would be more concerned if the state went up and our comparative DERG went up. I'm still concerned, and obviously Dr. Fieser is concerned, and our principals and Ms. Sinnel, as to why, and because we are doing a tremendous amount of work in this area, and it's really just to see maybe there's an amount. That's why we really emphasize the 5-year goal as opposed to year over year. We're hopeful that there's an adjustment back up in this year.
Everybody forgot to read.
That was a creative way of saying no, I don't know the reason.
Other questions? Mrs. Federico?
Just on the terminology, so this one's a matched cohort?
So for you to get a score,
Yep.
you had to be in Milford a year ago and then in this spring.
Okay.
So that's how they're counted towards Milford scores. You can't move into Milford in December of 2016 to take the assessment in 5 months later.
Okay.
You wouldn't be counted towards our score.
Okay. Got it.
That's what we mean by matched. You have to actually be in district.
Okay, because I'm looking at the heading on the next page, and it says same students advancing grades, and I thought that's what we would call a matched cohort.
This is where Dr. Fies and I got ourselves confused for about a good half an hour as we were debating this about a month ago. About this is growth, but it's year over year, but it's a cohort year over year. So we're trying to be clear. So what happens is when we show you this next year, it'll be a whole new group of students 4 through 7. And then the next year, a whole new group
Gotcha.
4 through 7, and then a whole
Okay.
different group 4 through 7. Some of those kids will obviously be same because they're 5 through 8 now, and then they'll be 6 through 8, and then 7 through 8. So some of those kids will still be in this group, but as second grade comes in after second grade after second grade. So it's not a true, when we report this throughout the years, they will be different students.
Okay.
This next page, the attempt here is we had students in 2016 in grade 3, and then the same students went to grade 4. Last year we have their scores, and then this year they're sitting in 5th grade in our schools, and we're going to report out on them. And then next year, we'll report out when they're in 6th grade, and so on. So,
Okay.
but when they're in 2020, those students who started with us in 2016 in grade 3, those students will be in grade 7. Now that we talked about this isn't a true cohort because it's called a rough cohort because as we talked about with the enrollment, students move in and out. In general, however, we have, as we go through the grades, we're about 95% of the same students over time.
She has the same
Okay,
question.
clear as mud.
I'm sorry, Dr. Gregory.
Would it be helpful to indicate rough cohorts somewhere on here, just because that way we don't go, well, I'm not going to, but others don't go through the same questions year after year?
If you turn to page 4 under the definitions,
But, I mean, on the actual title.
well, we debated that too. We had rough cohort and cohort, and we went with cohort, and then because we thought rough might confuse people, so we took it out. But we can put it back in, and when it confuses somebody next year, we'll take it out. We're easy like that.
Let's see, page 4, cohort. Oh, okay, so you don't. I was just thinking the same thing, that,
Question?
Mr. Whiskeyman?
On the cohort, page 9, if I understood you correctly, the same students, roughly, are in which grade this year? 5th grade. So this chart shows those students who were in 3rd grade, who were in 4th grade, and who will next be tested, and they're in 5th grade and will next be tested. So another question would be, so what about the current 3rd graders and current 4th graders? Do you have separate charts for each of those as they come through the rankings, or are you only tracking this one set of cohort students?
Well, again, that was something that we debated. For 3rd grade, we do have the year-over-year data. Those are different students in 3rd grade. So that's one way of looking at it. But we did debate, do we have multiple cohorts going on at the same time? Do you want to see, as a new 3rd grade comes in, we'll track them? Again, it won't be a 5-year goal at that point, because if 3rd grade came in last year, it'd be a 4-year goal. If we do this current year's 3rd grade, it will only be for 3 years. So that's something we can do. It'd just be more charts, and that's something we can. We can do a shorter one. We can do 4th to 8th grade.
Personally for more charts. I was just thinking of in terms of goal setting and whether or not, just to understand, this is one set of students for whom you have set a goal, and that you may or may not set some additional goals for additional sets of students, and that's not really what we're discussing at this point. I just understand. This is the one set of students.
We had a similar conversation with principals and teachers, principals in elementary school, 6th grades. But when it came to goals and a focus, we typically asked them to focus in on a grade for math and a grade for reading. And it's not as if just because the particular principal's focusing in on 3rd grade math in their school that they're not going to pay attention to the other 5 grades. So it's just a matter of, same thing for teachers, that teach multiple courses. We would ask them to choose one class. For example, an art teacher in middle school, they teach almost all the students in a particular school. We wouldn't set a goal for them. We would have them pick a grade level, for example. But that doesn't mean that they're not gonna be, paying attention to the other 2 grade levels. So it's a matter of, do we focus on everything, or do we pull a few things to help us understand, get a snapshot of where we are with a particular group? So, in other words, just because we're not measuring our current 3rd grade students in a cohort doesn't mean we're not analyzing the data, we're not talking to principals, we're talking to teachers, we're constantly having those discussions. It's just a matter of how do we create a set of goals and a set of targets, and then provide some measurement to the board to see how well we're doing.
Thank you.
Mr. Hagedorn.
Yeah, because I was wondering, do the principals and the teachers, because what if that 3rd grade that we're not tracking, and we all know that sometimes if a teacher changes and stuff, that grade can change for that group, as long as the teachers and principals are watching that. That's the main thing. I know what you're reporting to us is one thing, but as long as we are tracking it, because we're responsible for all kids, regardless. And we just want to make sure that they are tracking that also from year to year with those same students in the cohort.
Of course. As well as some of our principals set 2 to 3 year goals, and they track cohorts of students, etc. But as you recall, just 2 weeks ago, we do give you the annual report that details, more specific grade levels, as well as year-over-year data, as well as some cohorts. I believe we showed you 4 different cohorts, because we have 3 years of data. We're able to give you, 3 through 5, 4 through 6, etc., up to 6th through 8th grade. So in that report, you'll see the whole snapshot of the data available to us.
Excellent, thank you.
I would add to that, Mr. Hagedorn, that we engage in conversations with principals all the time around this, so that they will talk about. So, for example, I was meeting with a principal today who spoke about in 5th grade teachers look back on how well did their kids do in 4th grade, how well did they do in 3rd grade. They give more attention to how well they did in 4th grade coming into 5th grade. Where were the areas of strength, where were the areas of deficiencies, et cetera, so that the teachers have a sense of individual students,
that's exactly,
and then
you answered that question perfectly.
Absolutely, and the middle schools do the same, you can be guaranteed. So the 6th grade teachers want to see, well, how would they do in 5th grade, and the 7th grade, how they did. And the principals are looking at that data continually.
Perfect, yeah, that's spot on, exactly what I was looking for.
Good.
Perfect, thank you.
Mrs. Federico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just offer a comment that I think, to me, it seems a little bit limiting to be focusing on this one group as they move through the grades. However, this is all new. This is the first time we're looking at it this way. And if we want to start the targets with a little bit less, I think I'm okay with it for now. But maybe we come back to it once we kind of, get some time under our belts with looking at these targets. Because I think, like you said, we're still going to have the data. It's not that we won't have the data, but there's a lot here already. So I think it's okay for now.
Anything else on page 9? One more page.
Okay, as page 10, going back to year over year for the SAT, again, percentage of students at grade level as established by the state, and the 10-year goal is 85% in 2026. Obviously, we don't have cohorts because we have multiple years of data on these students. It really is a one-time test in the spring of their junior year.
So then on all of these, you'll put the B and CH at the top. Right?
We will do the formatting as suggested on the first page.
Okay. Any questions on this last page, Mrs. Krasinski?
Sorry, I know we went over this, but still, this one confuses me a little bit. So the benchmark is for this past year, 76.9, but that's reaching a cut, getting 650 or a 490 on the SATs. Is that what that is?
So for the SAT to reach,
this is the SAT, right?
This is the percentage, correct, at the state goal for students, and it is 530 for math and 490 for the ERW or the reading piece.
So this means that in 2017, 77.3% reached whatever.
Met the 490 and yes,
Okay.
on the SAT.
And does that change every year, the 490,
We only have
we don't
2
know.
years of data, because it's
Okay.
only the second year of the test last year, and they kept the benchmark the same, the goal, I'll use the goal.
Alright.
They kept the goal the same.
To me, it would be helpful, like on a little side note on the side, if it said, you know, math goal 490, reading or whatever they're calling it now, 525 or whatever, just in a little box up there.
Makes sense.
I agree.
Especially if they change it.
Any other comments on this one? Yes,
I
Ms.
just,
Federico.
I have a note from our previous meeting that, that perhaps we could also, at some point in the future, look into the PSAT for a possible, kind of a growth result or growth assessment. Is that still something we may be able to do?
The state through Ajit has cautioned us on that,
Okay.
until I get confirmation from them that that's something, you know, we track that as part of our data report. There's enough correlation. It's something that I'd want confirmation if we're using these as official targets.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, so this is a first reading, and we will bring this back. Can this be ready for the committee of the whole meeting, or should we do it at the November meeting? What would you suggest, Dr. Fieser?
We certainly could have this ready for the committee of the whole meeting. So it's
I
the
think it
board's
would be
choice.
probably wise to do that, so that we're sure to get it voted on. If you can have it ready for the committee of the whole meeting, I think that'd be great.
You can do that.
Okay. On the policies for the next policy piece, there were just minor, changes from the first reading to the second reading, so I didn't know if anybody, does any board member have anything that they wanted to go over on these, three? If not, we can approve them as a block, rather than going through each one individually. It's P 5118, P 5124, and P 5131.91. Yes.
Just a quick question. I know I brought this up last time, and Dr. Fieser, you said you were just gonna look at it one more time. Was the timing of notifying parents in,
I did, and I sent that to the board, in an update, so it's.
I'm sorry.
That's okay,
I'm reading it.
I just wanna make sure I have this straight, I wanna say it's 10 days, it's in the student's
Oh, no,
handbook.
that I knew.
Okay.
That, I meant advising parents no later than the end of the third marking period for 9 through 12, or the middle of the third trimester.
So which one is that on? What?
I'm sorry, it's page 1 of 2 of reporting to parents and guardians,
Okay.
P5124. Yes, page 24. If you're reading it
This way.
this way. So that, I had, I still think the middle of the third trimester is late, but you had said you were just gonna look at the calendar again and see if it matched up.
So I ran it by the middle school principals, and they thought it was appropriate.
Okay.
Because it's the middle of the marking period.
Okay.
So they felt that was,
Sufficient time for
to
kids
really,
to.
exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I did sit with them, because, you know, and they were okay with that. And then I also spoke with the high school people, and how it's stated with respect to the, because they're on a quarter system. So.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Any other questions? Okay, then, seeing none, a motion to approve these.
Okay, make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy 5118, resident and non-resident students. Motion to approve policy 5124, reporting to parents and guardians, and policy 5131.91, hazing as all three as presented.
second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
We have 4 policies that we're bringing forward for a first reading. And the first one is what used to be called school age entrance, and we've expanded it now to be called school age entrance, admission, placement, and ages of attendance. And if you had an opportunity to read through the policy, it makes sense. So the first part here, you can see that the biggest change is that we learned in checking the law that really the definition or the timeline for students to be able to enter kindergarten is reaching the age of 5 on or before the first day of January. We always had December 31st. The law says January. So that's the reason for the change in both kindergarten and for first grade in that top part. If there's any questions on that. And then it was recommended by Dave, and we thought that it made sense that there be a segment in the policy on admission. So this means when kids actually then enter school. And if you read through this, what you'll see is, first of all, a statement of that we do not discriminate, a statement here about special education, children being provided, being identified, and that they would then make sure that we are doing justice by all of the special education students. Any child entering the district for the first time has to present a birth certificate. A whole piece here on homeless children, which is in the second paragraph on page 29. A statement in here about students who are coming out of the Connecticut Juvenile Training School. And in the next paragraph, students coming out of what's called District 2 schools, which would be students who were incarcerated and then come back into the district, or coming in new to the district. So that's the whole piece on admission that we thought in reading the piece that Kay gave us, the updated, we sort of thought, wow, there's a lot in here that we did not have in our policy. Of course, our policy had not been reviewed for a number of years that we thought should be included.
I had a question about the, I guess, first full paragraph. It says, the expense of such immunization shall be on the recommendation of the board. Whether that was really necessary.
Where are you reading? Oh, on the
on
last
page
sentence?
29.
Right, the last sentence.
The last sentence.
Okay.
I know the city has they do an immunization clinic that I believe is free of charge for residents.
I think you're correct. I can double check this with the city, but I believe that if there is a family that cannot afford the immunizations, the city will look. They have places where they can. There are, I think, physicians in town that will do it
right
gratis.
At the health department.
Pardon me?
They do it right at the health department. They have an immunization clinic that you can go to. At the health department, I'm pretty sure.
What I'll do is I'll check to make sure this language is appropriately written or if it should be modified.
Any other questions on this part of the policy?
I had
Mr. Hagedorn?
one other part on page 30 where it says.
We didn't get there yet. We didn't get there yet.
Oh, okay.
29.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So the placement piece, that begins on page 29. This is again when children enter first grade, and then how first grade placement is determined. This is all language that was in the existing policy. And we took out one piece of it, but we took this one piece out because, quite frankly, at this point, we felt uncomfortable with the language. We felt that the first part of the statement, final placement will be determined exclusively by the observation assessment of a team of individuals, which may include the classroom teacher, social worker, other school personnel, and or the ELL coordinator if necessary, and the recommendation of the school principal, period. and to take out that piece about ensuring that only those children who are emotionally and socially, physically mature or cognitively capable. We just read it, and I know we ran it by Carol Swift. I mean, all of us sort of read it and just kind of felt we were not comfortable with that wording. But this actually speaks to the issue of placement again for kids coming into first grade, and then it speaks to placement of kids coming into other grades. This was the language that was in the existing policy. We thought it was written fine, and we left it as is.
Is this the section you had a question on, Mr. Hagedorn?
Well, on 30, just a thing where it says parent or persons having, shouldn't we just change it all to guardian like before? Because it might be a state that has guardianship versus a person.
Where is that? Last paragraph.
On page 30.
Oh, down at the bottom, okay.
Yeah, it's in a couple different sections there. Because they just put parents and those who have control.
Parent or guardians?
It says parent or person
Right.
having. Everywhere else we've made those changes in the system where it says parent or guardian.
Will that work, do you think? Will that
We
work,
can
Dr.
change it. I think it's language that the state uses now. They don't use the term necessarily guardian, they say.
Well, just because in all the other
Yeah,
ones
we have
before
guardian.
that, to keep consistent,
Yep.
because like, if the state has control, you know, the person having control, it's not a person, it's actually the state, which is a guardian.
We can change those.
So that would be in each pair, the second to last and the
Yes,
third,
the last-
yeah, wherever that is.
the last two paragraphs.
The third up from the bottom as well. This says parents and those who have control of. So, just say parents or guardians of
They
children.
change it in different,
Yeah, they do.
like,
That's
And then if you go on to the next page, the very first line,
It says the same thing.
the parent or person, it says.
It's within these.
It's weird.
Places.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, I'll try to see it here, it's here.
Did you have any comment on the ages of attendance, Dr. Fieser? We're on that section.
There's a lot of, some of this is legal language
Mhm.
with respect to 5-year-olds. So, you know, if you go down to the third paragraph, the parent or guardian of a child 5 years of age shall have the option of not sending their child to school until the child is 6 years of age, et cetera. But then the next sentence says the parent or guardian, it should say, having control of a child 6 years of age shall have the option of not sending their child to school until the child is 7 years of age. So in essence, parents have the right to keep their children out of public education until 7 years of age. That was new to me, but that's what, you know, we checked that with the law, et cetera. That's again why we put this piece in here.
Mr. Wiskiman?
In that regard, it would seem that if a child turned 7 and at that point under the state requirements became obliged to be entered into school at whatever time that occurred, if it were December or March or whatever time that occurred, they would be legally obliged to start school at that point, which would be awfully awkward for a student entering into first grade in March or April or something like that. And how would you manage? I mean, the student obviously couldn't acquire an entire year's education in the last couple of months and be prepared to advance to the next grade if they started so late. I'm sure you would advise the parents to start at the beginning of a school year. But still, I imagine at least on occasion you will run across a situation in which you might have a parent who delays until the last minute. Is there anything in our policy that we need to consider to address such a situation?
Well, the only thing that we address is that when a child turns age 5, and then we say that they by January 1, they can start
You can't,
the
yeah,
previous fall.
If you're beyond that, you can't start this year, you have to wait. And usually it would be next year till they would start.
Correct. And I would say that most first of all, it's only a handful of parents that would keep their children out.
Yeah, I can't imagine why
you know,
someone would.
and more often than not, children are being homeschooled.
Well, yeah.
Or they may be in an alternative. Go ahead, Mr. Bird.
So if you turn back to page 29, this might alleviate some of your concern there under first grade placement. It talks about there's a determination, there's a team that assesses the child, and then the final decision by the principal is final. So we have a policy in place. We also have many processes in place that would address this.
Yeah, okay. So if there was some alternative schooling that was occurring or education occurring, we could assess that and determine placement based upon the child's ability at that point in time.
As well as our abilities to properly educate the child, given our different programs or different grades, et cetera.
Yeah, of course.
It's also stipulated under on page 30 in the paragraph on other grades, and that was in our policy. So if you go to the second sentence, each child will be placed initially in grade level that he or she has reached. So 7 years of age, presumably they might go into the second grade. But it says, unless in the judgment of the school principal after assessment that such child should be placed in another grade. So your situation, if a child literally came in March and might get placed in seventh grade, but
you
if
would have
they
to figure out where to put them.
Correct, and so that may be that they literally would then be put into first grade.
It depends, right? Okay.
So there was really good language in the old policy, but there was more that we felt was important to really kind of enhance this or.
I have a question on page 31. Wondering, so the first full paragraph, it says that a child who has attained the age of 17 who is voluntarily terminated and then wants to seek readmission, why would they be denied up to 90 days? It says may be denied readmission for up to 90 days. What would cause that delay to happen?
So that was, believe it or not, that was in the law. I mean,
it's in the law.
We were really
Okay.
taken aback
Alrighty.
as well. So I'm not really sure.
All right.
So one of the scenarios we discussed, imagine it's January 2nd and exams at the high school are in 2 weeks. You might possibly delay it, or there might be some other reasons. I doubt we would do that. It's just an ability for us to do that as necessary. I can't imagine either one of our.
Right, or if a student were, for example, were to leave and it's May, and then they come back 2 weeks later and say, we want to come back in, and at that point you just say, you know what, we have to re-enroll in August or something like that. The 90 days we were really surprised by, but that's not our language.
Any other questions on P5111? Okay.
The next policy is attendance. And some of the definitions have changed. Attendancy and truancy are policies that seem to continue to change at the state level. So again, anything in black is our existing. You'll notice that on the page 33, the third paragraph down, mandatory attendance terminates upon graduation or withdrawal with written parent guardian consent at ages 17. Used to be 16, so that's been changed. Your definitions of attendance, part of it's the same as it was. Note that an in-school suspension for half a day or more, the child is considered absent. That's new. That's new and just the most recent legislation, I believe. And then there's others that of absence and excused absence, unexcused absence, or what they call disciplinary absence. There's definitions around that. So here's the excused absence, and there's much more detail under the excused absences. Some of this language is not necessarily new. It was in the policy on truancy, but the attendance policy was never linked to the truancy policy. So you'll see this is in red in the attendance. When we get to truancy, it's already there. But it spells out, you know, what happens, you know, when a student is absent 10 school days, excused or not excused. And on page 35 is the new definition of unexcused absence. Unless it meets the definition of an excused absence, meet the definition of a disciplinary absence, which is the result of the school or district taking disciplinary action. That's considered an unexcused absence. Chronic absenteeism is newly defined. A student whose total number of absences at any time, I'm on the top of page 36. Is it a student whose total number of absences at any time during a school year is equal to or greater than 10% of the total number of days? So for us, it's 18.5. If a student is absent more than that, they are considered chronically absent. And that's regardless of what kind of absence it is, excused or unexcused.
Dr. Gregory?
If it's in, say, September and a student misses 5 days and there's only been 20 or 25 days of school, are they considered chronically absent?
Well, this is the definition.
Right.
So it's 10% of the whole year is chronically absent.
No, that isn't what it says.
No, that's not what I'm reading.
Oh, you mean if they've been enrolled, I'm sorry, during the school year. That's a good question. One would assume that that's the case. So 25 days of school, 2.5 would be chronically absent.
So flu in September. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I know that the schools have checkpoints, but this changes. This definition is a new definition, so that's something that we have to meet with them, and also the attendance committee, you know, the truant committee that exists, and to take a look at this as well. And then, you know, new pieces. There's a district chronic absentee rate now that the state calculates based upon what we submit, and a school chronic absentee rate. Then we included in here loss of credit.
Can we go back to that for 1 second?
Sure.
Those two definitions. I questioned whether they seemed out of place where they are, and then I noted on the next page there's section 4 on chronic absenteeism. It seemed that maybe those two definitions would be better placed in that area.
We certainly can do that. We just left them here because they were definitions, but we can move them to under chronic absenteeism, if that makes sense.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And I agree with you. So there's no losses that we can't move them to a different place.
Yeah. Does any board member have any?
May I make another suggestion? If these are all definitions, maybe moving them up, so we have chronic absenteeism, then district, then school, and then truancy.
Yep. Mrs. Griffin pointed out that once all the junk is taken out, it's going to look very different once all the strikes.
Yeah, but the definition right above truancy on the page before that is chronic absenteeism.
Oh, right, okay, so put truancy after that?
And then put maybe district chronic absenteeism, school chronic absenteeism, and then truancy. So all the absenteeisms are together, or all the chronics are together.
Your comment, Dr. Fieser, is well taken, that those are definitions. There's so many pages of definitions, I lost sight of the fact that they were memorized. So I think it's fine where it is then. With Mrs. Krasinski's suggestion that.
The only thing, and again, I mean, it's not a major point. The only thing that I would say is truancy follows chronic absenteeism, because truancy is even more serious than chronic absenteeism. So a truant is an official. This is a legal definition of a truant, and this is a student who has 4 unexcused absences in any 1 month. Or 10 unexcused absences in any 1 school year is a truant, and then what gets kicked in with truancy is that, well, we just hired someone who is zeroing in on truancy. Part of that is because the laws have become so much more stringent around truants, with the hope of reducing the amount of truancy. And also, we have a formal truancy committee. You know, we just hired someone to do part-time work around truants. So the only thing I'm saying is we could move the district chronic absentee rate, but truancy and chronic absenteeism kind of go hand in hand. So it's your call, but that's why it's placed there.
Should we leave it as is, or should we switch them? Doesn't matter. All right, then leave it as is, if it doesn't really matter. Okay, leave it as is.
Loss of credit probably looks out of place. We were trying to figure out where to stick that, in all honesty. But we thought it was really important for it to be placed in attendance, that kids understood you can lose credit. You know, if you are absent, you know, so many days, and you know, what the appeals process is, that's all defined elsewhere, but at least it lists it here so that students understand this. A lot of this is in the graduation requirements policy.
I have a question. Is this 10 unexcused absences or 10 absences? So if a kid is very sick, they're hopefully making up their work somehow, but if they're out 10 days out of a year.
Are you talking about truancy?
No, I'm talking about loss of credit.
This is 10 absences for a half a year course. So if you're absent 10 days, you could potentially lose credit. So you have to make sure you have documentation that shows.
So if you're absent because you're ill, and you've made up the work and you have doctor's notes or whatever,
right,
then you're not going to lose credit.
That's correct.
Okay.
But if on the other hand, you were absent 5 days and you cut 5 classes,
Yeah.
hard pressed to justify.
This to me wasn't clear that it was unexcused, or it just seems like you're out 10 days and a half a year. You're out of luck.
Well, no, there's a whole appeals process,
okay.
and basically, I mean, it's pretty standard in most high schools that there's some limit, and then you have to show the doctor's notes, and or if you were hospitalized for 5 days, evidence of that, etc. That's
Okay.
how it is.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Gregory?
I agree that it seemed a little out of place. I was wondering if this, and possibly once it's worked out, the operationalization of the 10% might be better in an AR. Something that, like, I'm not sure that this is necessarily board policy per se, or whether it's how administration implements board policy.
For what, for which?
The
Loss of credit?
The loss of credit, and then the that operationalizing that 10%, if that's new, clarifying that September or October it's going to look different.
Yep.
I don't know, it was just an idea.
Well, you're right that loss of credit would be generally more of an AR, but I would recommend that there should be something in here that indicates that students potentially can lose credit based upon absenteeism, or something to that effect.
So where it says right here, criteria are defined in the AR, we would find more details there about what's acceptable for 10 absences and what's not, like you just said.
For loss of credit, you mean?
For loss of credit, sorry.
It would be spelled out for sure in the AR, and it would be spelled out also in the student handbook.
Okay.
Plus, the appeals process is also spelled out in the AR. Policy says. Okay, any other
I had one quick
questions on this, Mr. Hagedorn?
I had, on the page 33, It just, where it says, in attendance, is at least half of the regular school day. So if he came in late, he could still get full, like, let's say he got 2 hours late. You don't mark him absent for the day, cause it's whether it be morning or afternoon, if he left early or came in late and still got more than half of the days in, still would be, consider you make that change?
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted that, I wasn't too sure.
I have one question.
Yes, Ms. Storico.
Thank you. Related to the documentation for an excused absence, is it changing from 5 days to 10? Did I read that correctly?
So, I crossed that out when, and then realized that when I was reading the new regulations from the state, it said 10.
Okay.
So, me, I'd do 5, but, you know, and 5 is what we had in.
We had 5. That was my question. We had 5 and now we're going to 10.
Right. That's for giving in the, submitting the documentation.
For submitting the documentation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, then moving on to the last pages of this policy.
So, there's some new pieces here. This is on page 37. Excused absences for children of service members, which we don't have a lot of students. I mean, a district like Groton would have a lot, you know, of students. On the other hand, we have students. So, you know, there's this, a statement here, you know,
That was pretty
the student
self-explanatory.
shall be granted 10 days of excused absences in any school year and at the discretion of the board of ed, additional excused absences to visit such child's parent, you know, or legal guardian with respect to such leave or deployment, et cetera, et cetera. So we included that in here.
See. Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Krasinski.
My only thing here was, should it be at the discretion of the superintendent rather than the Board of Education?
Sure.
It's my only.
We have more hearings.
More meetings.
And it's interesting, the state is now collecting data on the number of students who are in families that are military families. So, Louis Giancola actually just sent out a memo today, or an email to all of the principals saying, in case you get any questions, this is mandated by state, I'm sending a notice to parents, maybe some of you already got it. One question, is your child a member of a military family, yes or no? That's the question that's being asked by the state.
I was wondering what that was about.
Yep.
Do you know why that would be asked?
No, I can see if I can find out more, but it's a request that was made by the state to collect the data.
Yeah, no, but that seems a little out of the normal, unless there's something with the child, but just a specific that.
Yeah. We can, I'll ask, you know.
Did anybody have any questions on the chronic absenteeism section? Section 4?
This is more about the obligations on the part of the district.
Okay.
And this is if we were declared as having a 10% or higher chronic absentee rate, which I believe is reported out on the accountability report from the state annually. And then a statement on page 38 about dismissal, which I found kind of interesting and wondered, well, do we need this? But on the other hand, it's emphatic about no school grade class teacher can dismiss students without, you know, outside of the regular school hours without permission.
I had a question above that, where in the italics it says the State Department of Education to develop by 1/1/16. There was an intervention plan. So I just am wondering, has that been developed, and if it has been developed, could that be deleted? Does that need to be in our policy?
Just the italics piece, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, we could delete that as an oversight.
Any questions on the dismissal piece, Mrs. Krasinski?
Just one thing, very last sentence, court official with legal permission takes custody of the child, the parent or guardian should be notified. Should it must be, should, rather than should? Should it be parent and guardian must be notified in these situations by administration?
So, this was language that was in there. I don't know if must can be inserted.
Okay.
We can find out because this is a court official with legal permission to take the custody of the child.
Okay.
So, if they can't get a hold of the parent or guardian.
Or a police officer arrests a student.
Right, in our policy, in the 1000s, I forget the language we use, but basically we say, you know, to do everything we can to try and get a hold of the parent, but to ensure also that there's an administrator present. Again, I think this is an extreme situations, but we can find out whether the wording can be changed.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Federico?
Thank you. I have a question. The second paragraph says, no teacher may permit any individual student to leave school. And then the third paragraph is, no student may be permitted to leave school at any time other than at regular dismissal without the approval of a student's parent or guardian. So if a parent shows up to pick up a child from school early, they have a doctor's appointment, the teacher can't permit them to leave, so the parent needs to check with the principal?
No, when they're saying that no teacher may permit an individual student to leave school, they're talking about a student saying, you know, I need to leave, I need to go home, etc. And the teacher gives the student permission, and the student walks out of the building.
Okay.
That's what that's referring to. That the only thing that the teacher could say is, you need to go to the nurse, you need to go to the office, and then let the office know so-and-so is coming down because he or she is saying that she needs to go home. That's
okay.
So the teacher can't, you know, unilaterally just dismiss a kid.
Okay.
That's what that means.
Any other questions on this policy? You know, it's getting late, but I hate to put the last two off because they kind of, at least the truancy one, it ties in with the attendance. So if we could.
It does, and there's a lot in the truancy that was already in, but you can see there's a lot of language that's been struck. So a lot of this language, quite honestly, some of this language was in, but should have been in the attendance policy and was not. The newer pieces, which you've seen again, are on page 42. Unexcused absence the new definition there. Chronically absent child. And then there's a piece in here, this is all new, the remediation of truancy. And again, this is all what needs to be done with respect to when the student is truant. And as I said, you need to know that we've had a truancy committee in place here for a long, long time when a kid is truant. The case is looked at, you know, by that committee. So in reading this, quite honestly, when I was reading through this new language, I started to think we are right. I'd like to say we were so forward thinking with respect to the state's legislation, but with respect to having hired, you know, created the position where a piece of that is taught around truancy.
Mr. Krasinski?
On just a couple of things on page 41. I was just, as you had said before, a lot of this stuff is in the policy prior, but since it is, I'm wondering if if it should be written the same exact way as in the previous policy, because it's more like for the 10th absence and all absences thereafter, it's more in narrative form rather than in bullets, and in the policy beforehand it was kind of done, you know, in an outline form, and I was just curious about that. And then on the next page, and maybe these definitions, do we have to have them again, or can we just refer to the other policy? I wasn't sure about that. And the last thing was on page 43 at the bottom, it said the board honor before 8/15/18. You just said do we have a plan in place now, or is that And are we gonna have to go back to this one in a year from now and take that paragraph out?
Well, this is, shall implement a truancy intervention policy if the district has a disproportionately high rate of truancy. So we don't have a disproportionately high rate of truancy. If you continue reading that sentence down at the bottom of that page.
So do we need that in there?
Well, it's saying that if you have, we can take it out, but.
I was just curious, cause it had a date in there, that's what struck me, is you have to have a plan in place by August of.
Right, if you have if a disproportionately high rate of truancy. I mean, we can remove it with the assumption that we don't have a disproportionately high rate of it, but it's basically kind of putting any district on notice. If you do, you've got to have this in place by August of 2018.
So the date refers to a time limit within which that this goes into effect versus a year from, versus it being respective to whenever, like if we were to have a disproportionately high rate of truancy 2 years from now, then at that point we have to have a plan. It's not like a year later you have to have a plan in place. So that's meant to be a specific date.
Correct.
So
if you have it right now. Ms. Swift, did you want to add to that?
I just want to let the board know that we have monthly meetings at the district level that supports schools and families with chronically absent students. We have the court systems there, we have DCF there, we have Bridges representatives there to support anyone who's struggling with chronic absenteeism. And also every school has an attendance team that meets monthly and looks at the kids who are who have 5 absences, and then they look to see who's nearing the 10 absences. So while we aren't required to have this,
we do it already.
Because of our status, we do it already because we feel that kind of monitoring and communication with families is supportive of them and is supportive of the children and gets them to school. So we already have it in place, and I'm not sure that we would want to take it out.
So can we just take out the date on or before 8/15/18?
Sure.
And then on the next page, on page 44, I would have the same question. There's a note there, the SD is required to identify the model by 8/15/17, so I would suggest that can be taken out as well, since we're beyond that. Okay, so on that, any other questions on this policy?
There's just one of the,
Yes.
the parents are guarding.
Okay.
I want to see it.
Christian, yeah,
on the
she'll put
bottom.
Mrs.
44.
Mrs. Griffin will go through and make those changes.
Right.
She can do a search, right?
Yes.
Right?
And then the last one, which
I
is.
have can I
Oh,
ask
I'm
one
sorry,
question?
yes.
I'm sorry. At the top of, it's page 43 in the packet, item D, there's a note in parentheses, persons who in good faith give or fail to give notice pursuant to this section. So what does that mean?
Let me read it again.
Sure. I've read it a couple times and I'm not clear.
Oh, that means they get a call from the office if the child's not at school and they haven't been notified.
Right, so what they're saying is that if for the sake of conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Swift, that if a teacher who in good faith gives notice or fails to give notice pursuant to this section shall be immune from any liability, civil or criminal, so that a parent who has a child who is truant couldn't turn around and file suit against the teachers. That's how I read this.
Because the teacher or administrator didn't call.
They're
didn't call the
immune
parent
from it. They're indemnified. I mean, that's
So the way I read that, because that was in the that same type of language was in the attendance policy. That if a child doesn't show up at school and the parent doesn't call in and say, my child's absent today, the school typically will make an attempt to call the child and make sure they call the parent to make sure the child is home. And if they make a good faith effort to do that or fail to give notice, then the school district would be, the secretary, whomever makes the calls, would be
They're
immune from
protected, in
liability.
other words.
They're protected,
If they didn't get
correct,
through
right.
to the parent, that
Right.
sometimes happens. You're trying to say your student is not here, you're tracking down the
Right.
emergency
Yeah.
numbers, et cetera.
Right, so that's the way I read that.
Okay, so it's make a reasonable effort, but whether you succeed or not, you're not liable. Okay.
And I would think in the same way, if in error, a parent was notified the child wasn't at school, even though they were at school, it would obviously upset the parent, but that would not incur civil and criminal penalties to the person who made that mistake, you know.
I don't know if that's covered under this policy.
You need to have some protections for reasonable human error, even though it can be unsettling when such a situation might occur.
Any other questions on the truancy policy? All right.
And the last one is the policy on retention, which, believe it or not, it was last looked at 6 years ago in 2011. We thought it was solid. We looked at the K pieces and looked at some other policies. We added one sentence that we liked from another policy. Chose deficiencies in the fourth line down just because weaknesses was used twice in the sentence. So there's really very few changes in that.
Mr. Hagedorn?
I just, on the top part where it says the best total,
I'm sorry,
on the retention one, where it says the Board of Education, is, where it says the best total and continuous.
Yeah, total development, yeah, I
Best
hear you.
total is.
Total is,
That's the best total, just, I don't know, just, what does that mean?
maybe we should cross that out and say best and continuous development?
That's what I was thinking, it was just, what the best total, it just, it didn't stand.
Doesn't sound right, yep.
Didn't
Some
sound
people
right.
just don't write the way you and I do.
it didn't make sense to me with best total.
I hear you.
Mrs. Krasinski?
The very last sentence, the Board of Education directs the superintendent or his or her designee to develop a retention guidelines. To me, are there retention guidelines already developed? And when, if we're directing you to develop them, by when should they be developed?
We actually have guidelines. Hey, Mr. Bird, you can speak to them directly because I know you've used them. And so have I a few years ago with respect to a family. But we have some guidelines.
So should that be changed, or
So maybe
does that
say
even need to
maintain?
be in there, or should that, because to me, I read that as we're asking you to develop something, but they're already developed, so.
So we could say maintain, to
Right.
maintain retention guidelines?
Well, usually in a policy, it oftentimes will say, the board directs the superintendent to develop regulations. Well, we have the regulations
true,
in place,
yes.
so I mean, that's just standard language.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting that these are not regulations, these are guidelines that, but we do have them in place, and we rarely have to use them because quite honestly, our philosophy as it's stipulated here is that we wouldn't retain. Sometimes we have parents who want to retain and we don't feel the child should be retained. That's happened,
We also have very specific retention guidelines for high school in terms of credit attainment. So those are all, yeah.
I figured you did have them, it just, to me, that's, I don't know, to me, it's just the way it reads, but that's normal language, that's fine.
It's normal language, and what happens is, the reason that I would recommend the board keep that in is for the sake of conversation, if somewhere down the road, the guidelines unbeknownst to you kind of get thrown out, and you have a parent who is complaining because, however a situation was handled, that there were the guidelines that were used before weren't being used, etc. It kind of protects you. It's basically saying, the superintendent has to have guidelines in place, and so.
Mr. Jagosinski?
Doesn't not retaining students lead to the phenomenon of a high school student reading at the third grade level?
So, that's a loaded question there, Mr. Jagosinski.
Well, this is a very controversial
issue. I hear you. But the overwhelming preponderance of evidence suggests that for the vast majority of students, retention does not serve them well. It's not saying that it never does, but so you have districts who will declare if students in the third grade have not achieved such and such score on their CMT. I mean, I know of districts that did that. They're to be retained. You know, and that's just really frightening to make a wholesale statement like that. I think also too, you know, there's huge issues around kids being retained and they're basically then doing the same thing, the whole same thing the next year over. And it may be that, you know, the student is poor in math or poor in in a couple of areas, but not necessarily everything. There's a detrimental, there's all kinds of research around the detrimental effect it can have potentially on students to feel like they're held back and the stigma that comes with that. You know, on the other hand, there are some students who may be recommended to be retained simply because their level of maturity, which then reflects itself in the quality of their work, et cetera, that we feel that it would be beneficial for the student to repeat the year.
And typically we deal with students in the younger grades that haven't attained really basic skills. For example, a kindergartner who's still, you know, typically what happens is a student that came to us without any kind of pre-K experience. So they really are doing catch up that whole year, and then we have to, at the end of the year, it's a full assessment in a meeting with the parents and just saying, you know, this student could use another year in this grade level, in particular because they haven't mastered those basic skills. As you get up in the grades, those differences become more and more subtle, obviously, you know, especially as you talk about 7th grade. You know, what is the difference between, you know, missing a couple of units versus, you know, being 2 or 3 years behind? At that point, you know, do you retain the student or do we find other ways to remediate students? We have a lot of systems in place to make sure that we're addressing the needs of individual students. In a system maybe 30 years ago, when you taught to the middle, you know, you taught to just the 80% of the kids, retention was great because students who weren't meeting that 80%, you can keep them back and then you taught them all over again and hopefully they made it up to that level. But in a modern system where we essentially try to address the needs of all students, and when we create targets at the district level, we address all students and we talk about principals' goals and teachers' goals, they have to address all the students sitting in front of them. And we do everything we possibly can, and we have a lot of services in place to address their needs. So it is something that we have in our toolkit, but it's just, we wouldn't go that first as opposed to using some other strategies.
You mentioned potentially a child's maturity being a factor in retention, but this policy specifically excludes maturity level being a factor.
So that was the wrong word. What I was saying is that, you know, it could be a student's behavior, it could be their mindset, it could be just how they're manifesting their grasp of what a typical student would be grasping in a grade level.
Why would we exclude maturity level as a factor?
Because I don't think, so I stand corrected by using that word, because I wasn't meaning purely maturity. What I meant was that there are some kids who are, they may be, whatever, 7 years of age, but what they're manifesting in as far as their learning is not where a 7-year-old may be. That's what I was talking about. But if you operated solely on maturity, it means that we could conceivably be keeping kids back who are very bright, but they're not mature enough to move on to the next grade level. And that's something we just simply would not do.
See, the way I read that word determining, it's like a qualifier. So if it wouldn't be considered at all, it would just say it wouldn't be a criteria, period. Determining to me means like a tipping point, that it wouldn't be the only reason, or, but it might be part of the overall reason. It's the way I read that. So. Other questions on this one? Okay, and seeing none, those four will be brought back for a second reading at the November meeting.
So the next item is the quarterly budget report. Mr. Ricciatelli?
Thank you, Dr. Feaser. Members of the board, I have in your package the quarterly budget report for the first quarter of the school year, or the first quarter of the fiscal year, from July 1st through September 30th. As you know, we come to you each quarter, but we're constantly looking at the budget and looking for areas where there may be any kinds of difficulties or any kinds of forecasts that would cause us concern. I can tell you that we've done that thorough review of the finances as to where they are right now, and excluding the, as Dr. Feaser said before, the ominous state budget crisis, we find nothing at this point that would cause us alarm or concern. The numbers are where we would expect that they would be. The numbers that are before you as far as available balance and percent used are either dollars that have been encumbered or dollars that have been actually spent. So, at this point, there's nothing that causes us concern. Teacher salaries are right about where it would be at this time of year. As we've talked about many times in the past, that's our biggest budget item, single budget item. And as we've said many times in the past, that fluctuates with people coming in and out, people on leaves. So that changes, really from week to week, or certainly from month to month. Where you see deficits, those are in areas in the special education area, which are normally covered by the state excess cost grant. We have great hope that excess cost grant will be continued at its current level, but that would be something for us to continue to watch and be concerned with if any changes in that formula were recognized. So other than that, as I said, we believe that we're in good financial shape at this point and don't foresee any adverse problems. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Jakuzinski?
The expended figure, is that a cash figure or an accrual figure?
That's what we've actually spent.
So it's a cash amount, or?
I believe so. I'm not an accountant, so yeah, I believe that's a dollar amount that's actually been spent in this quarter.
And how is the year-to-date encumbered figure arrived at?
The amount of money that's actually been encumbered up to this point, we encumber it on the books. We put an encumbrance in, which is basically a placeholder for what we anticipate the expense will be by the end of the year. We base it upon, for example, salaries. We base it upon every budgeted salary as if it were, if that person, or the person in that position were going to be in that position the entire school year at their rate of pay. So we would encumber that full amount. Things like electricity and heat and energy, we encumber where we believe we will be based upon the averages to date. But of course, that can fluctuate based upon the heat can be, if we have a mild winter, we're going to use less heat. If we have a you know, a crazy winter, we're gonna spend more. Same thing with what, I'll stop there, those are some examples.
And who actually determines the electricity figure, which is 765,000? Who actually determined that figure? Is there a formula, or, you know,
The department head, Pat Bradbury's spreadsheet is a long one. He looks at bills to date, looks at historical averages and the rates that were being charged at the time.
You know, the reason why I'm more concerned is what's just happened in East Haven, where they're $900,000 over budget and they're bringing in a forensic accountant. And, you know, my concern is that I don't see any way where I, as a board member, can look at this and know if that situation actually exists.
I'm not sure that, I don't know why you couldn't from this budget report. I mean, you can see there's you know, line item after line item after line item that's, you know, there's plenty of available balance left. We're certainly not overspending at this point in the year. I mean, things like preventive maintenance, account 4303, that's only what we've spent. We're not encumbering dollars there. We're only reporting what's actually been spent. Things like in the 3231 through 3238, you can see very little has been spent there because it's only the beginning of the school year and we haven't been billed for those services that are direct to students. So we're looking at the budget all the time. I'm not sure of the circumstances in East Haven. I don't know how at this point in the year they could overspend by $900,000. But I can tell you from my experience in budgeting on both the city and the Board of Ed side, that's not going to happen here. If we believe that we're going to have a situation where we're going to be overspent in an account, we're going to bring that to you in a quarterly report, or we're going to take the internal steps that are necessary to prevent that from happening.
I think if you look at the last line on the report, which shows the adjusted, the total budget amount, and then the year-to-date encumbered, you know, all those the variations. If we were overspent, then we'd have a negative figure in the available balance.
And if I could just, if we can only encumber up to 100% of that particular object or that line item. So we're not going to overspend except, and that's why I bring to your attention each quarterly report, if there's anything that's showing a deficit and what that reason is and how we're going to cover it if we are. This particular quarterly report, I'm identifying those special ed services that, and the way we're going to cover that is through the excess cost grant. But for instance, in the past, where we've known we were going to have a deficit in a particular account, we've identified to you where we're going to make up for that account.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Do you want to do the disbursement report as well for doing that, and then we'll go to HR?
The disbursement report is in your package. It identifies those items that the district has spent in excess of $1,500 for the month of September, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on any of those items.
Any questions?
Just one. Second or third page, line 192403, rooftop parts from Meadowside. Just curious, because I know Meadowside was last year's roof, right?
No, Meadowside is this year's.
This year. So was that not part of
the roof project bill, or?
Let's take a look. Let's look at the description. Can you give me that,
Sure.
the account number?
192403.
Well, I'm not finding that in my backup, but that doesn't, there's actually hundreds of expenditures, but a lot of them are not over 1,500, so I'm not seeing them right here. I can get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious why we would be paying out that, and that wouldn't have been part of the
Sure.
project.
That's fiscal year 16, so it might be in a different section for your backup.
No, I'm not finding it right off the bat, so we'll get back to you in the board update.
Any other questions on that report? All right. Thank you.
We'll end with our human resource report.
Thank you. We have a monthly report of job postings, personnel recommendations, retirements, resignations, and terminations. I'd like to point out a few items in case there are questions. On the job postings, we have a school nurse listing, and obviously that's not our employee, that's the city of Milford's. As a courtesy to them, we post sometimes for their positions where they're having a hard time attracting candidates. Also, we had a special education teacher resign from Foreign High School, so that's posted. And actually, after the printing of this report, we had a reading interventionist at the middle school retire, and we have her position posted now as well. And we are still looking for a library media specialist. We posted it as an anticipated opening as a 1.0 to determine if we can attract a better pool of candidates, because before it was only 0.75. The decision hasn't been made if we're going, depending on who comes forward, if we're gonna add that extra FTE. I know we have a little FTE to work with, so we'll keep you posted on that. And also in the terms, resignations, terminations, you'll notice there's a lot of cleanup in here. These are substitute teachers who did not respond to our annual mailing asking them whether they'd like to return as a substitute teacher for the 17-18 year. We give them 3 or 4 different chances to respond. If they don't respond, we terminate them from our employment, assuming that they're not interested.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Okay, then we move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Bias?
Okay, have a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items considering in a minute. September 11th, 2017 business meeting, September 18th, 2017 special meeting, and the September 25th, 2017 committee of the whole meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we have no new business board comment. Mr. DeGrego?
If I can just have 30 seconds, Madam Chair. I have 2 comments to make. One is on November 9th, I was invited to Harborside as a retired Air Force veteran to celebrate the honoring the veterans. And on November 10th, I'm invited to East Shore Middle School for the same reason. I do want to make, that's my comment. My second comment is to Mr. Riccitelli, but I want to make a brief aside to Mr. Burtz. Mr. Burtz, as far as Mr. Nielsen's STEP program, I read that catalog. That enhances critical thinking for the children of that age. I commend that book. I was reading some of the questions and I'm going, holy smokes. This is task oriented. It's not just a coloring book. And Mr. Riccitelli, please convey to Mr. Nielsen, as a former firefighter and a retired policeman, in 1959, there was a major fire in Chicago. 29 children were killed. As a result of that fire, by 1964, every school in this country had what was new then called a sprinkler system. Now, we take sprinkler systems for granted, and a lot of times, because of the teaching and the mindset that we instill, like Mr. Nielsen said, when you hear the fire drill, what do? You get out. Well, by 1964, every school had a fire drill at least once a month as a result of this fire. So because of that, by making these children aware of and make them task-orientated with this program, Mr. Riccitelli, Mr. Nielsen is the right guy for this job because he was a former police officer. And with that in mind, when the mayor's office calls us and says you got a flood coming, you got a tornado coming, now it's like, hey, Daddy, I think the mayor left a message on your phone. Mommy, the mayor left. Now it's like, hey, Mom, Dad, I got to get out my bag because the mayor called. We're going to get a tornado. And before you know it, the kids are now being involved, which is going to be a result of this program, just as that fire was to bring us to the sprinkler systems today. So now the children of Milford, and I'm telling the Milford community, the children of Milford are going to be cognizant. So it's not just going to be Mom and Dad listening to the mayor when he calls your house because you're going to get a thunderstorm. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. DeGrego, thank you. Any other comment? Seeing none, motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.